The girl saved her brother's life, but he cruelly pushed her away. Who allows you to call me brother? He turned and left without looking back, leaving the little princess shivering in the cold winter night. He was used to such treatment. His name is Yashtaroti. He is the empire's most esteemed princess. But his raven black hair made him a symbol of ill omen. In the high priest's prophecy, light and darkness would be born on the same day. The child of light would lead the nation to prosperity, but the child of darkness will bring calamity to all. Unfortunately, the little princess was born on the day of the prophecy. Because of this black hair, she was naturally regarded as an ill omen. She was made to live in the most remote palace, living a life worse than a servant's. But his illegitimate daughter, born on the same day, possessed silver hair, a symbol of royal bloodline. Therefore, he was seen as the embodiment of the prophecy's light. Naturally, he received everyone's affection. Thus, the two princesses grew up in vastly different environments. In the blink of an eye, young Tylerty was 12 years old. Only Loanna remained by his side to care for him. The palace where she originally lived had long fallen into disrepair, and her allowance was often cut off. The little princess's upkeep allowance, because of food shortages. At a young age, she learned to endure hunger. But even if life was incredibly hard, a contented smile always played on the girl's face. Loanna watched the child teasing a butterfly. Her heart ached. If only that damn divine realm didn't exist. Her little princess could have a beautiful garden like this too. But now, everything belongs to Princess Luminera. The princess planted lilies that bloomed all year round for that illegitimate daughter. But the princess of pure blood could only watch from afar. Even if she wanted to play, she had to sneak in. Loanna became angrier and angrier the more she thought about it. Such a kind child like Tyloti, how could she be the child of doom prophesied? While she was lost in thought, a rumbling sound came from the little princess. Loanna quickly asked the girl if she was hungry. However, the sensible girl covered her stomach and shook her head. The maid knew the little princess wanted to save her portion of food, but if children don't eat properly, they'll get sick. So he entrusted the little princess to a knight he knew well, and went to the kitchen to prepare food himself. Little Tyloti followed Ashwin obediently. He never expected to run into his brother and sister having afternoon tea in the courtyard, though. They are both his sisters, but my brother only loves the one with white hair. Just because black hair represents bad luck. So even though the little princess saved his life, the man only acknowledges Lily as his sister in his heart. The crown prince looked at the girl packing her luggage with displeasure. His disdainful look caused the little princess a sharp pain in her chest. This coldness was just like that night a few days ago. He anxiously waited for him to wake up, carefully calling him brother. He himself was shivering from the cold, but he covered his brother with the only blanket. But what he got in return was, "Don't call me brother. Only my sister Lily can call me that." At this moment, the little princess's heart felt like it was being ripped open. The family he had longed for treated him like a plague. "I'm your sister too," the girl whispered in despair, but she firmly imprinted the fact that she couldn't call him brother in her heart. So they met again. Little Tyloti obediently called out, "Your Highness, Crown Prince." The man didn't even notice the change in address. Only the little princess knew how much her heart ached. However, at that moment, Lily beside them suddenly spoke. She smiled and invited her sister to stay for tea. Naive little Taylor thought it was a family's concern, but she didn't expect the girl to mention her long black hair as soon as she opened her mouth. The arrogant tone carried a hint of disdain, making the little princess feel inferior. Compared to Lily, she seems much shabbier. My sister's hair is as beautiful as Lily's, and she exudes an air of elegance from head to toe. While I'm still wearing this simple old dress, I don't look like a princess at all, and her black hair foreshadowed misfortune. At that moment, she finally understood why her family disliked her. However, at that very moment, Lily suddenly noticed the hair clip by the princess's ear. How could she allow her sister to have something she didn't? So the girl arrogantly reached out. "Your hair clip is so cute. Give it to me." Lily's tone was an unchallengeable command. Seeing this, the little princess quickly took 2 steps back. She was so upset she was about to cry. But her sister completely ignored her resistance. "If others see this, they'll think I'm stealing from you. It's just a cheap Lily of the Valley hair clip. Is that why you don't want to see me?" It looked like Lily was about to grab it. A slightly haughty tone appeared on the little princess's face. Loanna had once told her, "The Lily of the Valley means, you will surely become happy." So this isn't just a small hairpin. It also holds her hopes for life. The girl declared righteously that the hairpin was hers. So he wouldn't. No sooner had she spoken, but Lily's face had already changed. This was the first time anyone dared to speak to him like that. The girl angrily smashed all the teacups on the table. He was waiting for his brother to stand up for him. In front of his brother, the little princess was bullied by the green tea sister. Scalding tea splashed all over the girl. Little Tyloti winced in pain. But Lily showed no sign of stopping. Seeing another heavy slap about to fall, the crown prince finally stood up. He abruptly seized Lily's small hand. "Stop it," the man said gently. But the willful younger sister didn't give her brother any face. She forcefully shook off her brother's hand. Tears fell like pearls. "Brother, you're going too far. It's like I'm trying to steal something from my older sister." His sister's accusations pierced his heart. The crown prince quickly promised to buy her an identical hairpin. However, this answer didn't satisfy Lily. He glanced at the little princess being comforted. Why should a jinx compete with him for his brother's attention? Thinking this, the girl sneered. Then she turned and ran out of the courtyard. He was waiting for his brother to leave his sister and chase after him. Watching Lily run away, the helpless crown prince could only let Ashwin chase after her. He himself stayed behind to continue drinking tea with little Taylodi. Although he doesn't particularly like this dark-haired sister, it hasn't reached the point where he would let others bully her, especially since the girl saved his life. Looking at the new dress he gave her on his sister, a sense of satisfaction as a brother welled up in the man's heart. However, the little princess knows nothing of this. Just as the girl hesitated whether to leave on her own, she heard the man beside her suddenly speak, "Is that a new dress you're wearing?" The little princess was taken aback by the question. So, was her brother showing concern for her? She still held on to a last sliver of hope for her family. However, when she told her brother the dress was custom-made by Loana, the eldest prince suddenly seemed to have changed. The man slapped the table hard. The little princess was immediately frightened and trembled. He subconsciously called brother, but was ruthlessly interrupted. "I should have told you. Don't call me that. You'd better be careful. Don't think I stopped Lily for your sake. You're not worthy." The man's face was filled with arrogant disdain, but the little princess painfully changed the subject to His Imperial Highness, the Crown Prince. He voiced the question he'd been suppressing in his heart. He is also the brother's sister. Why couldn't even a little bit of affection be given to him? However, before he could finish, the Crown Prince abruptly interrupted him. "If I had to choose one, I would choose Lily without hesitation." After saying that, the man turned and left without looking back, leaving the little princess behind in tears. However, the Crown Prince didn't know that his magic comb was left behind, and he'll soon regret everything he's done. Both princesses, the white-haired sister received all of her brother's affection, while the black-haired sister didn't even have the right to call him brother. The younger princess felt extremely wronged. It was she who was scalded by the hot tea. Everyone only cares about Lily's feelings. Thinking about this, the girl dejectedly prepared to leave. However, as soon as she lifted her foot, she kicked her brother's dropped magic book. Driven by curiosity, the little princess picked up the book, but she never expected that she could understand the incantations within. They were all languages she had never seen before. Thinking of this, the girl's eyes lit up instantly. She had long heard, learning magic requires exceptional talent. Someone like her, who can decipher spells, is 1 in 10,000. If she could learn the magic in the book, would her brother finally notice her? Would she finally be worthy of love? The little princess thought humbly. Suddenly, a strange passage of text appeared before her. "Find the magic of fate." This place seemed even beyond her brother's understanding. The girl curiously read the incantation aloud, never expecting the magic to actually work. A flash of white light appeared, and the next second, she was transported to an unfamiliar room. The pitch-black surroundings sent a chill down my spine. But just then, a dull thudding footstep suddenly sounded behind the little princess. He turned around in terror. He saw a black-haired boy, wearing shackles, looking down at him from above. "If you go back right now, I could choose not to kill you." The boy's face was devoid of expression, but the little princess still found him terrifying. She just hadn't expected her magic to fail at such a crucial moment. No matter how loudly he chanted the incantation from the tree, the surroundings remained completely unchanged. Now the little princess was utterly despairing. He trembled, awaiting death. But unexpectedly, the boy merely touched the bells by his ear. The boy's gentle demeanor was as if nothing had happened. Later, little Tyler learned that the boy's name was Lee Won. He isn't some imprisoned convict. He's the master of this castle. It's just that, for some unknown reason, he's forced to wear handcuffs. And he's not as frightening as he looks. He's even quite good-tempered. He would prepare a sumptuous meal for the little princess. He would also care for the small wounds on her hands. Every time the girl learned a new spell, she would show Lee Won immediately. The boy would patiently watch the whole thing. He would also gently praise her progress. These are the affections that little Tylerdy hasn't received from his family. He's long considered Lee Won his older brother. If he could, the little prince truly wishes to stay here forever. But he has a reason he can't avoid going back. Because Loana is still waiting for him in the palace. So the girl began to study magic even harder. But she didn't expect that her newly learned spell would almost cause a great disaster. To be able to return to her brother's side, the little princess was so exhausted she almost fainted. She practiced the spell to return home again and again. Her body also ached from the depleted magic. But even so, he still couldn't find a way back. He saw the girl's complexion becoming paler day by day. Lee Won, who hadn't intended to interfere, finally couldn't bear to watch any longer. He demanded that the little princess only use magic 50 times a day, and that she must wait until she's recovered before continuing her studies. The little princess puffed up her cheeks in protest, but Li Wen completely ignored her displeasure. The boy reached up and placed the magic book on the highest shelf. He never imagined, however, that the little princess, in order to go home, would risk her very life. That night, the girl secretly climbed the ladder next to the bookshelf. The magic book was very high up. Even on tiptoe, the little princess was still a long way off, but she really wanted to go home. So, despite the danger, the girl climbed up another rung. Just as he thought he was about to get the book, his body suddenly lost its balance. There was a loud crash. The little princess tumbled hard from the bookshelf. His plan to steal the book failed. He also woke up Li Wen next door. The girl waited anxiously for the boy's punishment. She didn't expect him to be concerned about his injury first. Li Wen gently lifted his bangs and the gauze. The moment he touched the wound, the little princess let out a pained gasp. Her pretty little face scrunched up in pain. Seeing this scene, the boy's heart felt a sharp pang. His movements became gentler, but he couldn't help but blame himself. If he hadn't hidden the book, this child wouldn't have gotten hurt. He just wouldn't compromise on limiting the number of practice sessions. He still wouldn't compromise, because the backlash from magical exhaustion is irreversible. In severe cases, it could even be life-threatening. These days, Li Wen had long since come to treat little Tailodi as his own sister. As an older brother, how could he bear to let his family risk their lives? In the following days, young Tailodi learned magic under Li Wen's tutelage. Although he didn't practice much, he had the guidance of a master. Progress is still very rapid. This day was like any other. The little princess learned a new spell. He excitedly prepared to show it to his brother. But as soon as he uttered the spell, the nearby bookshelf uncontrollably fell towards him. Seeing this scene, Li Wen's heart nearly stopped. He instinctively lunged forward, subconsciously using his back to block the heavy bookcase. Cold sweat trickled down the boy's cheeks, but he completely ignored the intense pain in his body. He worriedly asked the girl if she was all right. Seeing his younger sister shake her head obediently, his worried heart finally settled. Li Wen pretended not to be injured, but Xiao Tai Luodi's eyes welled up. He finally had a family that loved and cherished him. Meanwhile, the biased older brother with white hair only now realizes his younger sister has gone missing. He showered all his affection on the green tea younger sister, but his real little princess, who truly cared for him, went missing without anyone even noticing. Back then, it was young Tailodi who saved the near-dead De Huangzi. He carefully bandaged his wounds. She even covered her brother with the only blanket. The girl, after finishing everything, was covered in dirt, because she was afraid of being disliked by her brother. The little girl curled up alone on the ground. The cold night wind made the little princess shiver, but her heart felt sweet. He's finally no longer a poor little thing without a family. However, just as the little princess fell asleep, the crown prince woke from his coma. His wounds had already been properly treated. He then noticed a small, curled-up figure beside him. He subconsciously wanted to touch his sister's head, but he ultimately held back. In the high priest's prophecy, darkness would one day consume the light, and the only solution was to stay away. The crown prince cast a complex glance at his sister's dark hair. Then he coldly turned and left. He didn't expect that they would meet again the next day. The little princess timidly followed behind her maid, a placating smile on her shy little face. This timid demeanor inexplicably irritated the crown prince. "Thank you for last night, but I also want to thank you for taking a ragged rug from all those things and covering my body with it. Tell me, what reward do you desire?" The man's arrogant attitude was exactly like charity. The little princess blinked her eyes aggrievedly. He so wanted to tell his brother that rug was the best thing he could find. But in the end, the little princess only mentioned her own wish. She told her brother she wanted several pretty new dresses. Of course, these were all for Loanna. She didn't want any for herself. The crown prince didn't expect his sister's wish to be so simple, so he not only made dresses for Loanna, he also had a few custom-made for his sister. It was to repay the girl for her care that night. Only then could he feel at ease ignoring his sister. But the crown prince didn't expect his credit to be stolen by a maid. So when he heard his sister say her dress was lost, and Anna was sick, he got so angry. He planned to confront the maid in person. Unexpectedly, he ran into him right after leaving the small garden. "Do you like the dress I sent you?" Before Loanna could reply, the crown prince aggressively questioned her about why she lied. Loanna trembled in fear. "But when I think of the injustices the little princess has suffered all these years, I suddenly wasn't afraid anymore. Your Highness, you are truly despicable. You are only kind when you are happy. When you're unhappy, you simply abandon people. In your eyes, our princess is not even January 10th, 000th as beautiful as Princess Lily. But if that's the case, why give her a negligible amount of hope? Do you know how painful it is to have a sincere heart repeatedly trampled on?" Loanna's words were like daggers piercing the crown prince's heart. Enraged and ashamed, he wanted to retort, but he couldn't utter a single word. He remembered his sister calling him brother, her voice like stars. Then he remembered the despair, the tears streaming down his face when he was abandoned. Was he really as pathetic as Loana said? The man felt increasingly heartbroken. Finally, he fled in disgrace. Right in front of her older brother. The green tea younger sister blatantly bullied the little princess. Afterwards, she ran to the emperor and falsely accused her first. The girl's eyes were red as she looked at the man on the main seat. Her tearful appearance seemed as if she had suffered a great injustice. She pitifully stated that she only wanted to look at her sister's hair clip. I didn't expect my older sister to be angry. Lily, with a docile expression, acted as if she didn't blame her sister. A single sentence won the favor of everyone present. For a time, the palace was rife with rumors that the Calamity Princess bullied the Princess of Light. Many said that Princess Telodi lacked manners. Some even said the divine prophecy was about to be fulfilled. Only by executing the little princess can Mingxin be stabilized. Soon, these words reached the second prince's ears. The young man's eyes suddenly darkened. This was completely different from the timid little girl he remembered. Noah vaguely remembered their first meeting was on a winter afternoon. Little Telodi was curled up on the steps. He tugged at his hair sadly. He mumbled, "It's because I'm too dirty that people hate me." The second prince's gaze was involuntarily drawn to him. Just looking at his hair, he already recognized the child as the darkness from the high priest's prophecy. Just as a princess. His clothes are rather shabby. The little princess looks thin and small. She doesn't seem as dangerous as the divine realm described. Thinking this, the second prince walked towards her, backlit. Seeing the girl shivering from the cold, he unthinkingly removed his own cloak. The sudden warmth brought tears to the little princess's eyes. But this cloak was far too precious. He wanted his brother to take it back quickly, but the second prince gently shook his head. He thoughtfully adjusted his sister's collar. Just think of it as your family caring for you. He has many cloaks like this one. But the little princess's expression at the time was like she had found treasure. So, such a well-behaved child. How could he possibly steal something from someone? The second prince plans to find a chance to ask his elder brother. Meanwhile, the crown prince also heard the same rumors. His resolve wavered even more. But according to the high priest's prophecy, approaching darkness will bring disaster. He's unwilling to give up the throne that's now within his grasp. Just as he was agonizing over the decision, a rapid knocking came from outside the study. Seeing that it was Sir Ashwin, the crown prince impatiently waved his hand. But the next second, he heard news that shocked him beyond belief. Princess Telodi had disappeared. The man's heart jolted violently. A surge of intense unease washed over him. He suddenly regretted it. They were both his sisters. But because black hair represented bad luck, even if the little princess was beaten and scolded, the crown prince merely watched coldly from the side. His heart always leaned towards the fair-haired Princess of Light. But he didn't understand why, after his sister's disappearance, his heart ached so much. The man frantically searched through the drawer for his grimoire. He vaguely remembered it contained a locating spell. But I searched everywhere and couldn't find the book anywhere. The crown prince panicked completely. He frantically ordered a search for the missing princess. He then slumped onto his chair in despair. He never imagined that one day his sister would completely vanish from his life, without even giving him a chance to regret it. The man painfully recalled the scene from a few days ago. He had clearly seen Lily steal the princess's hair clip. But as her older brother, he did nothing. He even told his sister that if he had to choose, he would choose Lily without hesitation. If he could only look back then, he would have noticed the girl's desperate tears. Actually, the crown prince didn't not love his sister. It was just that his childhood experiences blinded him. His mother was an obsessive lunatic. From a young age, she demanded that he become the perfect heir. Verbal abuse and beatings were commonplace. She could only see inheriting the throne as her sole goal. Even so, the crown prince still deeply loved this harsh woman. But not long after, her mother passed away. Because of this, she, as a young child, became despondent. Until the boy first met Lily. That child, beautiful like a lily. The little girl softly called him brother. The high walls the crown prince had built around his heart instantly crumbled. He, originally, simply didn't believe in the existence of any divine realm. But at this moment, he treated his white-haired sister as a deity. He just didn't know why. The vivid face of Lily in his memory gradually blurred, replaced by little Tyrode's shy smile. At this very moment, the crown prince felt as if his heart had been ripped apart. He clearly cared for the little princess. But why did he have to hurt her again and again? If heaven gave him another chance, he would definitely treat his sister well. Thinking this, the man got up and went to the little princess's side hall. The high priest had repeatedly warned him not to go, but he couldn't control himself anymore. Compared to his sister's safety, what did the position of crown prince matter? He just didn't expect. My sister's empress palace is surprisingly dilapidated, and he is about to learn the truth, a truth that will fill him with regret. My two sisters were born on the same day. But my brother only loved the one with white hair. He ignored the sacrifices of the younger princess. He wouldn't even let her call him brother. However, only after the girl disappeared did the crown prince realize how terribly wrong he had been. He went alone to the princess's palace, but the further he went, the heavier his heart became. The desolate courtyard seemed to accuse him of his partiality. Upon entering the inner hall, he was astonished by the scene before him. The wooden beams looked as if they might collapse at any moment, and in the vast palace, not a single candle could be found for illumination. This was no place for a human to live. Yet his sister had lived in such conditions for 10 years. For a moment, the man felt a mix of emotions. He asked Loanna to take him to see the little princess's room. However, as he started up the steps, the crown prince almost stumbled. He lowered his head, and noticed the dilapidated state of the stairs. The thought that his sister might be the injured person sent a fresh jolt through his heart, but Loanna seemed to have grown accustomed to it. He helplessly explained that he knew the stairs were dangerous, but they didn't have the extra money to repair the palace. The princess's allowance was often cut off, so just filling their bellies was already a struggle for them. The winters here are always very cold, but even when his hands were frozen and cracked, that child never complained. Speaking of which, Loanna's eyes suddenly softened. Her Highness the princess always dreams of the day her family will come for her, so even if life is hard, she still shines like a little sun. Looking at her hopeful face, I really can't bear to shatter her beautiful dream. If Anna's words were like sharp knives, he laid bare the truth the crown prince dared not face. The man couldn't imagine anything more agonizing than this. So his brother was this pathetic? It was he who time and again chose Lily, and it was he who time and again pushed his sister further away. Just as the crown prince was lost in thought, the group had arrived at the door of the room. From a distance, the man smelled a nauseating musty odor, and after opening the door, the scene inside was even worse. The dark, damp environment wasn't even as good as a frightening woodshed. The wardrobe was filled with nothing but old, dirty clothes. Seeing this, the man suddenly realized something. He painfully covered his eyes, letting the tears fall freely. His sister covered him with her cleanest blanket, but he used the cruelest words to wound a heart already broken. Thinking of the girl's desperate eyes, the crown prince wanted to slap himself to death. He was the worst brother in the world, just because black hair represented bad omens. Even though his sister had tried so hard to please him, blind in both sight and heart, he still gave all his love to the green tea princess. And at this very moment, standing in his sister's room, the crown prince finally understood what it felt like to be suffocated by pain. His sister had ultimately abandoned him and left, but just then, his peripheral vision, however, inadvertently caught sight of the wardrobe. The magnificent style of the cloak was jarringly out of place in this dilapidated room. The crown prince seized upon it as a lifeline. He instinctively believed this garment was connected to his sister's disappearance. Unfortunately, Loanna told him that it was a gift from the second prince to the little princess long ago. The girl was too reluctant to wear it, so she kept it neatly folded. When she missed her family, she would take it out and hug it for a while. But she didn't dare hug it for too long, afraid of ruining this only gift. Loanna's voice was choked with emotion. He once begged the little princess not to like her family anymore. They don't deserve it. But the girl at that time just smiled and shook her head. His eyes were full of helplessness. I wish I didn't like him. But it's not something I can do just because I wish it. After listening to Loanna's words, at this moment, the crown prince was already in tears. He was like a trapped beast, helplessly roaring in the darkness. If heaven gave him another chance, he would spend the rest of his life making up for the past 10 years of neglect. Unfortunately, all the clues have gone cold. Now, the only person who could possibly have taken the little princess is the assassin from a few days ago. It was the high priest who sought him out that day. The elder stated with certainty that a dangerous person was lurking near the bright princess. So the crown prince, without a second thought, went to Lily's sleeping quarters. And just as the high priest had foreseen, upon entering, he saw a man in black robes chanting an attack spell. At that critical moment, the crown prince instinctively shielded his sister. The sharp blade pierced his waist and abdomen. But even so, he still erected a magical barrier for Lily before. That man fled towards the princess's side hall. He pursued him all the way to this vicinity. It's a pity the assassin didn't catch him. He himself fell unconscious from excessive blood loss. Thinking of this, the crown prince's heart ached again. He could get injured and bleed for Lily, but he left the little princess who had taken care of him all night where she was. He has 2 younger sisters, but because of his own partiality, he lost one of them. The crown prince's hands trembled uncontrollably. He had actually long since placed little Taylodi in the same important position as Lily, but because of that damned pride, he repeatedly hurt the girl's feelings. The man painfully clutched his hair. He dared not think about those past details, but everything before his eyes was brutally reminding him just how much of a failure he had been as a brother. The crown prince thought to himself, deceiving himself, if he had reached out that day, even just once, little sister, wouldn't she have left without disappointment? Wouldn't she have been able to forgive him? He didn't fail to see his little sister's worn-out clothes. didn't fail to see her tear-stained cheeks. He was just pretending not to see. The man's nails dug into his flesh, but that pain was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. That child stayed up all night taking care of him on an empty stomach, but he only gave his sister a disdainful look in return. He wouldn't even let the girl call him brother. But the child still carefully clutched the few old clothes they had given him. The crown prince could no longer distinguish between heartache and despair. He silently turned away. His only remaining hope was to find the magic book as quickly as possible. Even if his sister refused to forgive him upon her return, he would still find her. The first prince is searching for his sister all over the world. Meanwhile, in a distant eastern land, the little princess has begun a sweet life with her new brother. They've started a sweet life together. Yuan gifted little Telodi a magical garden filled with blooming, dazzling flowers. The shy little flowers bowed their heads, but they seemed to be telling the little princess to be happy using the language of flowers. Only, this familiar scene was too similar. In an instant, the girl's nose felt sour. He had envied Lily's lily garden more than once, and countless times he had fantasized that his brothers would also give him one. Unfortunately, the dream seemed to have shattered. It wasn't that she wasn't worthy of having it. It was just that her family didn't love her. She subconsciously touched the hair clip by her ear, but she didn't expect that this extremely important gift to her was gone. The girl frantically searched everywhere. Liwen gently patted her shoulder. She comforted the little princess to eat something first. Then she took out a pre-prepared sandwich from the basket. During this time, the boy had already figured out the girl's tastes, and he was also willing to take care of the little princess's daily life like a personal butler. Speaking of which, if his sister were still alive, she's also about the same age as a girl. The boy's gaze towards little Taylor was full of reminiscence. Just then, the little princess suddenly spoke. He was a little curious, and asked if his handcuffs could be unlocked. Seeing her brother's difficulty in moving, the girl really wanted to use magic to help him. Such a considerate younger sister. He didn't spoil her, yet he only loved the spoiled and capricious green tea princess. Only when he completely lost her, did the crown prince realize, in his heart, just how important was his little sister. Unfortunately, the little princess already had a family that truly loved her. That belated affection was worthless, cheaper than grass. He no longer needed it. Compared to the crown prince's cold words, my new brother has never once looked down on my unlucky black hair. He even protects me gently, like a knight. So, in just a few short days, Li Wen's place in little Tyler's heart has already far surpassed those two heartless brothers. Therefore, the girl wants to do something for the boy from the bottom of her heart. She touched her brother's wrist with concern. The rough shackles had chafed the skin raw. If only I could help my brother. Thinking this, the little princess suddenly had an idea. Maybe the book contains a spell to unlock shackles. And she also wanted to try the homeward spell again. So the little princess gently tugged at her brother's sleeve. He looked obedient and said he would go look for a way to unlock it in a book. But before he could turn around, Li Wen already grabbed his wrist. A flash of apprehension crossed the boy's eyes. The little princess instantly felt as if her secret had been revealed. However, before he could escape, Li Wen behind him spoke coldly. "You're not trying to trick me, are you?" Hearing this, the girl stammered and shook her head, but she saw the boy's eyes crinkling with laughter. Only then did the little princess realize she had been tricked. But play is play. And fun is fun. Li Wen once again stressed the importance of rest to his sister. Overusing magic is tantamount to overdrawing your life force. He understood his sister's desire to go home, but he would never, ever hand over the magic book. After saying this, the boy innocently blinked. Her annoying expression really angered the little princess. Watching the girl's lively expression, Li Wen also showed a relieved smile. This child is much more lively than when she first arrived. It seems her efforts haven't been in vain. The next second, the boy raised his hand and ruffled his sister's hair. Then, she helplessly stated that she didn't want to take off the handcuffs yet, because if she did, some people would be scared. She nonchalantly tugged at the corner of her mouth. Anyway, to her, wearing shackles for a lifetime isn't impossible. Li Wen said it so casually, but the little princess's heart suddenly clenched. She loudly told Li Wen, "No, no. I can't hide and live." She knows the despair of being feared by everyone, so she can't let her brother sink into the mire. Just because black hair represents bad luck. The little princess was disliked by her brothers from birth, bullied by her green tea sister, and lived in the most remote palace. Even a full meal became a luxury for a young child. Such a life was already cruel enough. Yet people still blamed the girl for the queen's death. She became a true harbinger of disaster. Except for Loanna. No one cared whether she lived or died. But until she met Li Wen, she realized a brother could be so gentle to his sister. After spending these days together, she had already considered Li Wen her most important family member. So he felt even more reluctant to see the boy tormented by shackles. The little princess looked at her brother's wrist with heartache. Her wet eyes looked like they would start crying any second. Now it was Li Wen's turn to be at a loss. He could only compromise and assure his sister that he would definitely not hide and live in secret. His handcuffs would also be removed sooner or later. Hearing this, the little princess's heart finally settled. He curiously asked Li Wen if he also liked Inglan, but saw the young man already turning away dejectedly. A wry smile touched his lips. Then he spoke lightly. My family used to like her. The little princess couldn't detect any emotion in her voice, but she could feel the deep despair within. It was like every time she tried to get closer to the crown prince, she knew her actions were like moths to a flame, yet even covered in wounds, he still threw himself into it without hesitation. He couldn't help but love his family, just as Lonai had taught him. Love is selfless. In the following days, the little princess begged to see the magic book every day. Unable to resist his sister's persistent pleading, Li Wen could only return the magic book to the girl. This was unexpected for the boy. He never imagined his sister would find a way back so quickly. It was a sunny afternoon. The little princess was quietly reading in the courtyard. A gentle breeze played with the girl's long hair, but she was unusually engrossed, for she had found a magical spell. See the description above. As long as she completes the magic circle, she can instantly teleport to the person who misses her. The little princess couldn't wait to try it. He believed that Loana surely still missed him. However, at that moment, Li Wen suddenly appeared. Working hard? A flash of admiration crossed the boy's eyes. The little princess playfully stated. She just didn't want to cause him any more trouble. He had already found a way back. After saying this, the girl muttered a spell to herself. Under Li Wen's shocked gaze, an eerie portal appeared out of thin air. Right in front of her brother, the little princess prepared to leave using magic. He couldn't bear to leave Li Wen, this handsome and gentle brother. But ultimately, Noina was the family member who had taken care of him for 10 years. Thinking about this, the girl cast the homeward spell. But unexpectedly, Li Wen, who had always been so obedient to him, disregarded the danger and hugged him tightly. No matter how the little princess struggled, the boy refused to let go. Of course, he had his reasons for doing so. Most teleportation magic is fraught with danger, and my sister's frail body is even more vulnerable. Under these circumstances, the slightest misstep could lead to her demise. So no matter what, Li Wen wouldn't let his sister take the risk. Unfortunately, the little princess doesn't understand her brother's intentions. He only knew that Loana was still waiting for him. The girl struggled to grab the portal in front of her, but the next second, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if someone had jabbed him hard. In the blink of an eye, the magic door vanished. Watching Loana's shrinking figure, a deep sense of despair washed over the little princess. If she failed this time, she might never get another chance. Thinking of this, he ignored the objections and cast the spell again. In an instant, patches of grass spread from beneath his feet like melting snow. He and Li Wen were pulled into a beautiful space. There, he saw Luana's Shuiying standing before him, and he was so close to going home. Thinking of this, the girl trembled and rushed towards Shuyong. Li Wen shouted from behind him. Judging from the current situation, the entire magic is on the verge of losing control. If this continues, my sister might die. But the little princess couldn't hear a word. She desperately wanted to return to Loana's side. Even though the pain from the magical backlash made her whole body tremble, she still struggled to walk towards the phantom. Even if it meant crawling, she also wanted to crawl back to Loana. But the next second, a wave of intense dizziness swept over her brain. For a moment, the world seemed to go dark. The unprepared princess fell heavily, but the expected pain didn't come. Li Wen steadily caught her. The boy carefully shielded the girl in his arms. Looking at his sister's relieved eyes, her heart was filled with self-blame. If she hadn't stopped her, the girl wouldn't have suffered such serious internal injuries. But she also has her own unavoidable difficulties. Li Wen sighed bitterly. His expression softened. During these days together, he had grown fond of this optimistic and cheerful child. He remembered when the child first arrived. He curls up in corners because of a lack of security. He always likes to curl up in corners. He eats very little of the food prepared for him. It seems enduring hunger is his specialty. And yet he is so kind. My concern for him is just an afterthought. But the child could be moved to tears. All these strange behaviors made Li Wen feel that this sensible child had never been treated kindly. In little Taylordy, Li Wen always saw his own reflection, so he hoped even more that the girl could be happy, because of her brother's interference. The little princess was afflicted by the backlash of the magic. She fell into a coma. At this time, she lay weakly in bed. Her pale little face looked like she would breathe her last breath any second. Li Wen cared for her lovingly beside her. But the girl remained unconscious due to her severe injuries. At that moment, he was having a long, vivid dream. Many people in the dream were desperately searching for him. Loana, Ashwin the knight, even the crown prince. They were all worried about him. At the end of the dream, brother seems to have cried. Such sadness, as if he lost his most precious treasure. So these are the tears brother shed for him? The next second, the little princess woke up from her dream. But where was the sorrowful crown prince? Only Xiao Xian remained by his bed. Li Wen, who took care of him. At this moment, the girl's expectant heart instantly sank. She should have known long ago that the crown prince wouldn't miss her. With the understanding Lily by her side, her brother probably still doesn't know he's lost her. The little princess smiled bitterly, hiding the disappointment in her eyes. She immediately nestled into Li Wen's arms. The little princess, who had been unconscious for several days, finally woke up. The young man was nowhere near his usual refined and noble image. He chattered on, giving his sister a lengthy lecture. Upon learning that there was no serious injury, Li Wen's heart finally settled. He gently told the little princess, "I've prepared your favorite raspberry sandwiches for breakfast tomorrow, so get a good night's sleep tonight." After saying this, Li Wen prepared to turn off the lights and leave. But before he could turn around, her little sister gently tugged at his sleeve. The little princess raised her face pitifully. After a long while, she stammered a plea. "Could you stay with me a little longer?" Before Li Wen could answer, the girl burst into tears. He swore he wouldn't be bothersome. Not even for a minute. He sleeps alone, afraid of the dark. After saying all this, the little princess realized she had spoken out of turn, making so many unreasonable demands. "I probably should be hated." Thinking about this, he quickly apologized to his brother. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have lost my temper. Please don't abandon me." His voice trailed off. The little princess herself didn't even know what she had said. He was just afraid that Li Wen would leave him heartlessly, like the crown prince. Just as the girl was lost in thought, the boy had already sat back down by the bed. He mumbled, "It's alright if I stay with you until you fall asleep. But who told you that you needed someone to keep you company? It's just a tantrum." Li Wen's voice was thick with anger, but the girl wasn't scared at all. She even felt that Li Wen's anger was similar to Loana's. It was the kind of emotion that only family members feel when they truly care about you. Thinking about this, the little princess's mood suddenly relaxed, so he gently shook his head. No one had ever told him these things, but only loved children have the right to be willful. But the one who isn't loved loses everything with a single cry. After speaking, the girl touched her black hair bitterly. From the moment he was born, he was destined to not be the favored one. They are both princesses, but his white-haired sister receives everyone's affection. She can cry and make a fuss. She can be willful, but the little princess with black hair has nothing. Nothing at all. Even calling the crown prince brother depends on his charity. That's why she's so afraid of being abandoned. She tries to please everyone around her, but after a long time, she gets tired too. She, too, longed for a safe haven. The girl tugged at her black hair in frustration. Even her own family, bound by blood, couldn't accept her, let alone Li Wen, whom she'd only known for a few days. Perhaps she really was cursed, as the prophecy foretold. Otherwise, why was she always the one being abandoned? The little princess revealed the secret she'd kept hidden in her heart. But the boy's eyes slowly reddened. Their childhood experiences were so similar. Both were deeply wounded by the very family members they loved most. That's why he stubbornly didn't want the little princess to leave. It was Li Wen who secretly stole his sister's hair clip. He also bore the backlash, interrupting the girl's magic. The boy tried everything to keep his sister, but it seems the little princess is determined to go back. So, is he going to be abandoned too? At this moment, Li Wen could no longer maintain his aloof image. She begged her sister to stay a few more days, but the princess shook her head helplessly. She told Li Wen that if she stayed any longer, she feared Loana would do something foolish, and she wanted to make one last effort. Although she had repeatedly warned herself not to harbor illusions about her family. But the longing for family affection for over a decade isn't something he can change just because he wants to. After listening to his sister's words, Li Wen sighed helplessly. He really couldn't do anything about his little princess. The young man gently held his sister's small hand. He put the lily-of-the-valley hairpin, a symbol of happiness, back into the girl's hand. Not everyone in the world will love you, so you don't need to love everyone either. Look, the people who love you are already here, aren't they? The gentleness in the young man's eyes was almost overflowing. He softly said, "I'm sorry." He shouldn't have selfishly kept the girl confined to his side. But before he could finish, the little princess threw herself into his arms. The kind girl didn't suspect her brother of stealing her hairpin at all. Listening to him repeatedly thanking her, Li Wen felt his baseness had nowhere to hide. At that moment, he was even more determined to send his sister home. So, after the little princess fell asleep, Li Wen quietly returned the magic book to the bookshelf. He deliberately placed it on a lower shelf, but in his heart, he prayed that the girl would discover it a little later. Unfortunately, the boy's wish was not to be granted. The little princess woke up and immediately noticed the magic book on the shelf. He cruelly hurt his beloved younger sister. So heaven took away his right to be a brother. At this moment, the crown prince was frantically searching for the little princess. He sent out knights, one batch after another. But all the news they brought back was bad. His sister vanished without a trace. Not a single clue left behind. The man angrily threw the files onto the table. He was tired of hearing, "We've done everything we can." Thinking of his sister possibly starving and freezing out there, the prince's heart clenched. He furiously rebuked the knight's incompetence. But as he raged, he painfully pulled at his own hair. Ultimately, it was all his fault. He, the older brother, had failed. Every corner of the palace had now been searched by him. Their only hope rested on the second prince, whose magic was unparalleled. Though their relationship was far from amicable, for the sake of finding his sister, the first prince gritted his teeth and summoned his brother. At that moment, he was like a gambler willing to pay any price, as long as he could find my younger sister. She's willing to do anything. Meanwhile, the little princess was just recovering from the backlash of the magic. He weakly moved his stiff body. A pair of expectant eyes anxiously searched for the gentle boy. Unfortunately, Li Wen seemed to have left already. A flicker of disappointment flashed across the girl's eyes. But just then, he noticed the spellbook on the shelf. Could this have been deliberately left there by her brother? Thinking this, the little princess strained to tiptoe. It's a shame the book is so high. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't reach it. After several attempts, the little princess slumped back onto the bed in frustration. Her little face, round like a steamed bun, was puffed up with anger. She muttered under her breath, "My brother didn't do that on purpose, did he?" But just then, his little head suddenly had a bright idea. He had learned quite a few useful everyday spells during this time. Now they would finally come in handy. Thinking this, he softly recited a summoning spell. Unexpectedly, the books on the shelf landed steadily in his arms. "These are the crown prince's things." The little princess quickly wiped off the dust with her sleeve. He carefully turned to the spell that could send him home. But at this moment, the girl suddenly hesitated. On one side is Loina, who cares for him like a mother, and on the other, the Theory, who treasures him. Both are family he cannot bear to leave behind. But in the end, the little princess chose to return home. The girl devoutly recited the incantation from the book. However, this time, the portal didn't appear. His magic failed. The brother finally realized that the neglected little princess was the sister who truly cared about him, while Lily, whom he loved for 10 years, never cared about his life or death. But he was blind to it. Again and again, I hurt that already broken heart. If only everything could be done over. He would beg his sister to call him brother one more time, even just for a lifetime. Wouldn't his heart hurt so much less now? But now he can only hope that the second prince can find a clue to his sister. And so, for the first time, the first prince lowered his proud head. He humbly begged Noah to help him. His defeated look was like that of a gambler who has lost everything. However, all his efforts were in vain. Even the most powerful search spell. I can't find even a trace of the little princess. Watching the magic moonlight gradually fade, the hope in the crown prince's eyes also dimmed little by little. Meanwhile, the little princess, anxious to go home, suffered one magic failure after another. She stared at her own hands in annoyance. So, what exactly went wrong? After numerous attempts, the girl finally found the hidden reason. The summoning spell just now had depleted her already meager magical reserves. Now, if she wants to go anywhere, she'll have to lie back down and rest properly. Thinking of this, the little princess couldn't help but sigh. He had prepared himself mentally before he reluctantly went back. Otherwise, he really wouldn't feel comfortable leaving Li Wen alone. He always felt that beneath the young man's strong exterior was a fragmented heart. It's a pity that he now has reasons he can't refuse to return. The little princess decided to go home and report her safety before finding a chance to come back. After all, in his heart, he had already accepted Li Wen as his brother. But Li Wen didn't know any of this. He had already made up his mind to let go. Even though his heart ached with reluctance for the little princess, he can't keep the girl imprisoned by his side like a villain for life. Loving someone means fulfilling their happiness. And what Li Wen has to do is help the little princess achieve all her wishes. Lost in thought, the boy's eyes were hot and stinging, but he still forced himself to smile. That child should be back with his family by now. I hope he remembers my advice. Some people aren't worth loving. You must love yourself first, to love someone else. Thinking about this, Li Wen looked at his shackles. It was time for him to let go of the past and face his life. It turned out that even the gentle and strong male lead had a painful past he couldn't bear to recall. That's why he willingly put on the shackles. He closed off his heart. Young Li Wen once had a happy and harmonious family. His father was the empire's most renowned lord, and as the heir, he displayed astonishing magical talent from a young age. The people loved this powerful yet well-behaved child, so he was jokingly called the ace of the Forman region. For a time, pride blinded the young man's eyes, and tragedy silently brewed in the corner. At this time, Li Wen had been intoxicated by the praise. He began to try all kinds of competitive magic. However, in a careless mistake, the uncontrolled spell cruelly broke his younger brother's legs. Even though his parents didn't blame him afterward, the seeds of self-reproach took root and grew in the boy's heart. He chose the latter, escaping instead of apologizing, because he feared that this evil power would again harm his beloved family. Li Wen stubbornly shut himself off. He thought that by staying away, no more accidents would happen. If things had ended there, they would still be a happy family of 4. However, for some reason, rumors of the extinction magic appearing began to spread like wildfire among the people. Eventually, it reached the emperor's ears. The mad emperor wanted to obtain this evil power. So he summoned the foreman father and son. On the way there, the father repeatedly instructed Li Wen that no matter what happened, he must not admit anything. But when he arrived at the palace gates, events unfolded far beyond his expectations. As soon as he stepped onto the red carpet, they were surrounded by heavily armed guards. And even more unexpectedly, his mother and younger brother were also there. At this moment, Li Wen clearly understood that this was a banquet set specifically for him. The next second, the emperor knelt before Li Wen. I have something I wish to confirm. I hear that Foreman's trump card can use annihilation magic. A murmur like a child's. But it was even more terrifying than a curse from an evil spirit. The boy could only hang his head and not answer. It wasn't that he didn't want to admit it, but once he did, his father would be charged with the crime of using magic. But Li Wen ultimately underestimated the ugliness of human nature. Before he could react, the emperor's blade had already plunged deeply into his father's body. Meanwhile, agonized cries came from his mother and younger brother. He watched as his family's flesh was torn apart piece by piece, their bones broken one by one. Li Wen could no longer bear the torment. He desperately chanted the incantation. The next second, a terrifying magic array, like a vengeful ghost made real, enveloped everyone. However, at that critical moment, his dying father grabbed his son's sleeve. He used his last ounce of strength, stopped Li Wen's attack. She is a gentle and kind true princess. But because of her black hair, she is being oppressed by the arrogant and two-faced fake princess. She lives in the most remote palace. She wears the most tattered dress. First meeting, Li Wen even mistook little Tailodi for a beggar who had trespassed. But later he learned that he had picked up the little princess of D Kingdom, and she, like him, possessed astonishing magical talent. Looking into the girl's eager eyes, Li Wen seemed to see a proud reflection of himself, with the same extraordinary talent, the same ambition, the same spirited and naive nature, easily deceived. This made Li Wen subconsciously treat little Tailodi as his younger sister. She transferred all the guilt she felt towards her family over the years onto the little princess. But even so, she still couldn't forgive her past self. If she had been ruthless enough to kill the shameless emperor, wouldn't her family members have avoided such a painful and tragic death? But there's ultimately no such thing as a regret pill in this world. Li Wen, stopped by his father, abandoned his attack. But his mercy was repaid with even more brutal torment from the emperor. Ultimately, kindness succumbed to malice. He watched as his loved ones fell one by one into pools of blood. Tears streamed down the boy's face. But no matter how desperately he apologized, those departed family members can no longer hear it. However, it's not over yet. After doing all those evil deeds, the despicable royal family even blamed the duke's death on Leoren. Overnight, that spirited young man lost everything. He went from being the acclaimed foreman ace to a despised madman. That's what falling from heaven to hell feels like. Li Wen, not yet 12, was forced to wear hundreds of pounds of shackles. He was imprisoned in a dark, airless basement. And this lasted for 3 years. Every day and night of those 3 years, he was tossed and turned in the nightmare of guilt, unable to sleep. Until he met little Tailodi. This innocent and kind girl stumbled into his life. Like a warm little sun. She gradually healed the wounds in his heart. Li Wen genuinely treated the little princess as his own sister. How could I bear to let my beloved leave my side? But since the girl has a reason to go back, this time, he'll go find her. Thinking this, the boy gently curled the corner of his lips. They would definitely meet again. Meanwhile, the little princess had rested enough. He once again chanted the homeward spell. A surge of air erupted from beneath his feet. The next second, the girl was transported to an unfamiliar room. She cautiously looked around. There was no sign of Loanna. Yet, on this stone bed, a strange, white-haired man sat up. Just because of his black hair, he was considered an imposter. Clearly, he was the princess of the purest bloodline. But she's still not as good as an illegitimate daughter of unknown origin. The things my younger sister wants. As her older sister, I have to yield. But even so, she still wants to try again. Even just once. She also wanted to experience the feeling of being loved by her family. So the little princess recited the homecoming spell. As long as someone was thinking of her at that moment, she could teleport to that person's side. However, the girl never imagined that she would be transported to a strange room. The opulent decor highlighted the owner's distinguished presence. The little princess's heart leaped into her throat. She mistakenly thought her magic had failed again. So she prepared to slip away quietly before the homeowner woke up. However, at that moment, the person in the bed suddenly sat up. She pleaded painfully with the girl not to leave. Her soulful eyes seemed to see someone else through her. The little princess was instantly stunned. The familiar white hair and green eyes. Even though they had never met, She knew the person in the bed was her father. In an instant, all his grievances welled up in his chest. He hadn't expected that the person who missed him the most was this neglectful father. However, the next second, the emperor's words fell on the little princess's heart like a bucket of cold water. The man was calling his mother's name. It turned out his feelings were foolishly misplaced. It seems their parents must have had a very good relationship. That's why the father hates the self that killed his mother. Thinking of this, the princess just wanted to escape from the man's side as quickly as possible. She nervously dodged her father's touch. Using her remaining magic, she once again chanted the teleportation spell. With the surge of the air wave, the emperor instinctively drew his weapon. The little princess trembled with fright. He almost blindly jumped into the spatial rift. Fortunately, this time, he finally teleported to Loana's side. Meanwhile, the crown prince also sensed the unusual magical fluctuation. The familiar feeling confirmed to him that his sister had returned. He couldn't stop his hands from trembling. His heart was filled with a mix of emotions. At this moment, he had no idea how to face his sister, whom he had wronged for 10 years. Should he admit he's a sensitive, selfish jerk? To hurt the person who cares most about him for a ridiculous divine realm? And after doing so many wrong things, he still has the nerve to tell his sister he loves her? How can he even say that? He ultimately owes his sister an apology, even if my sister refuses to accept it. Even if doing this will cause me to lose my title as crown prince, I must give that child an explanation. The little princess, considered a calamitous star, is the true light, while my sister, who hoards all the affection, is a fake, an imposter. It turns out that even before little Telodi was born, the empress had already dreamt of the divine maiden. In her dream, the deity gave the little princess the name of an ancient god, and sent a message to the world, that she was the new generation's divine maiden. However, for some reason, the divine realm passed down a different version. The queen, who was to inherit the position of high priestess, died in childbirth. But the new high priestess went even further, spreading rumors that the princess was a harbinger of disaster. As time went on, even the most blatant lies would be believed. Little Telodi thus became the darkness that people desperately avoided. If it weren't for this accident, the crown prince wouldn't even remember he had an extra sister. She could have continued to lavishly spoil Lily with a clear conscience, and ascended to the throne she'd always dreamed of, under the high priestess's manipulation. But some things, once the truth is known, then I can't go back. These 10 lost years are like a thorn, deeply embedded in the crown prince's heart. During the days my sister was missing, he sought out the best investigators in the country. I've made countless dresses, each with a different style, but even though they filled my sister's closet, they couldn't fill the emptiness in her heart. And this belated guilt, fueled by time, grew and grew. Finally, the little princess is back. The crown prince must apologize to his sister, no matter what. If he doesn't do something, she'll go crazy. Just then, the second prince arrived. So the two brothers resolutely went to their sister's chambers. Meanwhile, the little princess was curled up on the sofa, sipping sweet milk. It seemed that after he left, the queen's palace budget increased. The dilapidated floors and stairs were repaired, and even the food became more abundant. For a moment, the little princess wondered if her father and brothers had remembered her. The next second, she dismissed her unrealistic fantasy. The girl smiled wryly to herself. Perhaps they haven't even noticed her disappearance yet. But just then, an urgent knocking broke the princess's thoughts. As soon as Loana opened the door, the two princes stormed in. They anxiously asked where the princess was. Seeing this, the maid impatiently intervened, but the crown prince barged in regardless. However, after a few steps, he saw his sister hiding in the corner. The moment their eyes met, the crown prince felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The child wasn't wearing the new clothes he had given her. The dirty cuffs silently accuse their owner's past. So his sister still refuses to forgive him. Facing his sister, whom he has wronged for 10 years, the brother foolishly attempts to gain her forgiveness. He thinks that by giving her pretty clothes, and repairing their dilapidated house, then his relationship with the little princess could return to how it was before. But some things, once broken, can never be put back together. Just like the look in his sister's eyes. From expectation to disappointment, ultimately, it lost all its luster. The child would rather wear faded old clothes then touched the new dress she carefully chose. Only at this moment did the crown prince truly taste the bitterness of loss. Yet even so, she still refused to give up. The man insisted on going inside. Ignoring the servant's protests, he barged in. Loana bit her lip in anger. The little princess reluctantly followed. In a moment, 4 or 5 large men crammed into the small drawing room. As soon as the girl sat down, the two princes vied with each other to state their intentions. The eldest prince worriedly asked where his missing sister had been. And the second prince also anxiously expressed that they had been searching for her so hard these days. Both their voices trembled with concern. It's as if they truly missed their long-lost sister. The fervent heat in their eyes seemed genuine. However, the little princess uneasily avoided their gazes. The scene of her brothers coming together to find her, it was something she wouldn't dare dream of. If it were before, he'd be so happy he couldn't sleep. But now, his heart is filled with only a deathly calm. Just like Lewin told him, some people aren't worth loving. He used to try so hard, hoping his family would look back at him. Even if it's only 1/10 of Lily's, he would cherish it and wouldn't let go. But now he knows who is the family member worth his devotion. Thinking of this, the little princess looked directly into her brother's eyes. The crown prince was startled by her resolute and indifferent gaze. His sister's look at him had completely changed. The expectation and tenderness were gone. Only indifference and calmness remained. At this moment, the crown prince felt an unprecedented panic. He regretted it so much. I regret not cherishing that child who would be satisfied with just a pat on the head. That child who, even when shivering from the cold, would give his blanket to his sister. Thinking of this, the crown prince wanted to say something more. But then he saw blood suddenly seeping from Loanna's lips. The little princess immediately rushed over without hesitation. Once upon a time, my sister also cared for him so much. Sadly, it can never be like that again. The cruel crown prince, who hurt his sister so badly, finally regrets it. But the little princess now refuses even to call him brother. Loanna just bit her lip. The little princess was so heartbroken she almost cried. But facing her blood-related brothers, the child was as cold as a stranger. In an instant, the crown prince felt a pang of pain in his heart. But all of this was their own doing. Once upon a time, this focused and passionate affection belonged to him too. His well-behaved younger sister would warm him on cold winter nights, using her small, unsteady hands to heal his wounds. Even after being cruelly hurt, she would still timidly call him brother. But he messed everything up. He didn't dare to recall it. I recalled the awful things I said. He wouldn't allow his sister to call him brother. He also warned her fiercely. If he had to choose, he would choose Lily without hesitation. The man increasingly felt like a terrible brother. His sister's attitude also made him afraid. So the crown prince abruptly stood up. He desperately wanted to prove that he still held a place in his sister's heart. What should you call me? The man's voice was choked with pleading. But he didn't get the answer he wanted. My sister called him, Your Highness. This was a punishment he himself requested. But now, hearing it is even more ironic than the cruelest insults. Yet, even so, the man still refuses to give up. He deceives himself, saying they are blood-related family. He wanted his sister to call him brother again. But the little princess uneasily lowered her head. The past hurts were deeply ingrained. He was no longer the child who would let himself be beaten and scolded for a bit of candy. He feared that everything before him was a trap. As long as Shang Duo was around, he would warn him not to harbor unrealistic hopes, just like last time. In the end, the youngest princess chose to close her heart. And the crown prince didn't get his wish. Hearing that long-lost song, he was like a defeated rooster, leaving his sister's residence in dejection. However, as soon as he went out, the man clutched his chest in pain. The guards asked if he wanted a physician, but the crown prince trembled and waved them away. His sincere heart had been trampled in the mud. This was the agony of living death. He finally understood his sister's past pain, but he doesn't know when the child will forgive him. Meanwhile, the high priest already knows about the prince's visit to their sister. If this continues, his embezzlement with the head maid will be exposed. So, an even more evil plan is born. The little princess is in danger. The crown prince finally understands. He loves his dark-haired sister, and those who bullied the little princess will finally suffer the consequences. All this time, she has been secretly investigating her sister's past experiences with prejudice. And some things, the more you investigate the truth behind them, the more shocking it becomes. It turns out that, unbeknownst to him, the funds allocated for the princess's upbringing had been embezzled, leaving very little. In other words, for a whole 10 years, my younger sisters barely survived by scavenging leftover food from the kitchen. No wonder that rusty hairpin was such a treasure to that child. It was something he couldn't afford even with his meager savings. Thinking of this, guilt washed over the crown prince's heart like a tide. If only he had discovered the accounting discrepancies sooner. If only he had known about his sister's situation earlier. Would he have a chance of being forgiven now? But this belated regret comes too late. Now all he can do is help his sister find the culprit. Meanwhile, the head maid has rushed to the high priestess's temple. He tried his best to maintain a calm exterior. However, his trembling hands betrayed him. It was indeed the woman who secretly embezzled the little princess's upbringing fund. But this was done so brazenly under the high priest's protection. He thought everything was done secretly and smoothly. But he never expected that the princes would actually care about that unpopular ill-fated child. Now the regiment commander is completely panicked. That's why he humbled himself and came to the temple to beg for help. It's a pity that the high priestess never intended to help him. This greedy woman is merely a tool for abusing the little princess. Now that the embezzlement plan has been exposed, someone needs to be a scapegoat. But he has something more important to do now. The annual sacred rite is coming soon. He needs to garner more public support for Princess Lily. As long as the people believe that black-haired Tylordia is a symbol of disaster, someone will never have a chance to turn things around. Thinking about this, the high priest in the corner revealed a sinister smile. It was you who sent yourself to him. His hand caressed the rows of forbidden black magic books on the shelf. An even crazier plan was thus born. He used this very scheme to steal Tylordia's identity back then. He replaced the true princess, the symbol of light, with a false princess created through alchemy. This time, it will surely succeed again. The dim light reflected on the high priest's ferocious face. The princess is in danger. 10 years of ignoring his sister. Now he's desperately trying to make amends. Unfortunately, the princess is unwilling to open her heart to her brothers anymore. He coldly rejected the prince's concern. He wouldn't even talk about what happened during those days he was missing. The child who had tried so hard for love was tired. Now he didn't want anything to do with his brothers. However, the little princess forgot that someone else was also worried about him. At this moment, inside the emperor's council chamber, the man on the main throne was frowning displeasedly. Since seeing his daughter that night, he had been restless. The child had actually used long-lost spatial magic, and she could never forget those eyes, shining like stars, and his mother. But the more it was so, the more he couldn't accept his daughter's existence. It was the empress who first betrayed their love, so it's understandable that he ignored the child. The emperor stubbornly suppressed his guilt towards his daughter. Instead, he coldly questioned the crown prince before the throne. Why did he disobey his orders? Secretly visiting the empress's palace? Seeing his father's sudden anger, the crown prince didn't bother to defend himself. Images of his sister caring for him flashed through his mind. That kind child shouldn't be treated as darkness, reviled by all. She should be a princess, cherished and protected. Thinking this, the crown prince, for the first time in his life, talked back to his father. He told the emperor that his sister was not some ominous ill-starred child. She was just a normal child. However, at that moment, the man on the throne suddenly smiled. From beginning to end, he didn't believe in the oracle's prophecy of a calamitous star. Even when the high priestess foretold the child of disaster, he ordered the demolition of the temples in the 9 imperial cities. But how could a child who can use teleportation magic be ordinary? Now it was the crown prince's turn to be stunned. His sister used spatial magic. That means she really left during those days she went missing. Then why didn't she tell me? A surge of intense anxiety washed over the crown prince. His sister didn't believe him. Or rather, she no longer considered him her brother. At that moment, the man smiled bitterly. Isn't this all his own fault? He only just found out that his younger sister has magic. How dare he expect that child's forgiveness? Thinking this, the crown prince reported everything he had seen and heard these past few days to the emperor. He even described the dilapidated state of the empress's palace. The emperor was utterly enraged. Meanwhile, he was consumed by endless remorse. No matter how much he blamed her, she was still his daughter. He immediately ordered someone to fetch the little princess. The emperor always thought the little princess was doing well. That's why he could so easily and comfortably favor his other daughter. He even poured all his guilt over neglecting little Tylordia onto Lily, because in his eyes, money could make up for the lack of fatherly love. But he didn't know what an unfavored child in the palace would face. No one wants to take care of a disgraced princess, especially one considered an ill-omened star. So the assigned maids were replaced again and again. In the end, only Loena remained, and the head maid seized the opportunity to steal the young lord's upbringing fund. Thus, this child, who should have lived a life of ease and comfort, lived a life worse than a servant's. And this went on for 10 years. 10 years was enough to extinguish a child's longing for their family. And when the emperor learned the truth, it was already too late. The little princess now only felt strangeness and fear towards her father. So when the knight handed him the emperor's invitation, the girl's face turned pale instantly. He vaguely remembered his father drawing his sword that night. So was this a death sentence for his nighttime intrusion into the palace? Or would he be cruelly humiliated, like his brother? Or would he be viciously mocked with the words that he would always be inferior to Lily? At this moment, the little princess felt timid. Even though she had prepared herself for not being loved, she still didn't want to face that cruel hurt. So the little princess stammered, searching for excuses to refuse. Seeing this, Loana's heart ached. Her little princess seemed so afraid of the outside world. That's true, though. Some people's existence doesn't deserve to be called family. Even if they regret and apologize, they don't deserve forgiveness. Unfortunately, the emperor's invitation is one they can't refuse. However, at that moment, the little princess suddenly said she had a stomachache. Watching him painfully clutching his stomach with his small hand, Loana's heart also went up. Only where the maidservant couldn't see. A flash of guilt crossed the little princess's eyes. This was the first time she had lied to Loana. But if she hadn't done so, she might die. What she didn't expect was that after the emperor learned of her illness, He actually sent a huge amount of medicine. So many vials, she couldn't use them all in a year. But Telodi felt no joy whatsoever. Perhaps father's concern was just a passing fancy. However, he completely underestimated a father's determination to see his daughter. For the next 5 days, he received invitations from the emperor. It seemed he had to find time to meet with him. 10 years of neglect led the father to try desperately to compensate his daughter. The wronged little princess just wants to escape far away. She no longer trusts those family members who hurt her. For 10 whole years, no one ever remembered her in the corner. Only Loana kept her company on her birthdays every year. Brilliant fireworks illuminated the entire night sky, but none of them bloomed for her. What's even more ridiculous is that these fireworks were all prepared for his sister, who was born on the same day as her. At a young age, he had already tasted the bitterness of heartache. And as time went by, these hurts became deeply ingrained. So the little princess finally learned her lesson. He no longer craved his family's affection, but he never imagined that his father and brother would regret their actions only after losing her. From the first moment he saw his daughter, the image of little Telodi lingered in the emperor's mind. The child reminded him of his deceased wife. And after learning about his daughter's miserable life over the past 10 years, guilt took root in the man's heart. As a father, he began to try his best to compensate his daughter. However, his invitations were repeatedly rejected. Having no other choice, the emperor could only take advantage of his daughter's kindness. The day was like any other. Ashwin brought another invitation from the emperor. The little princess glanced at the envelope and prepared to feign illness. But he had already used every excuse she could think of. Now she had absolutely no reason to refuse. So the girl blinked her eyes in distress. He asked the knight if he could be excused. He truly didn't want to face his partial father. However, Ashwin, kneeling on the ground, hesitated. Deep down, he didn't want the little princess to suffer any more harm. But the emperor's wrath was not something a mere knight could withstand. After much deliberation, he couldn't bring himself to speak. However, the sensitive princess had already seen the knight's predicament. As a princess, she could refuse without hesitation. But Ashwin couldn't. Looking at the man's appearance, he seemed to have already received punishment for being implicated. Therefore, he couldn't selfishly let those around him suffer for him. Thinking this, the little princess suddenly made up his mind. He tried to control his trembling hands. Although he was still afraid of seeing his father, but for those who cared about him, he was willing to overcome his inner fear. So the little princess took Ashwin's hand, giving him the courage to conquer everything. In fact, escape solves nothing. However, the little princess didn't expect that her father truly loved him. And the 10 years of silence and neglect were simply because he hated his mother so much. 10 years of ignoring his daughter. Now he's trying every means to beg for forgiveness. Unfortunately, the emperor's painstaking efforts at compensation are all in vain. The little princess wouldn't even touch her father's tea and snacks. He just looked at the man coldly, just as his brother had when he apologized. He didn't understand why some people only regret their actions after they've lost something, and such compensation only made him feel disgusted. Just then, but the emperor suddenly wore a wistful expression. He praised how much the little princess resembled her mother, but the next second, he was overcome by unpleasant memories. The tenderness in his eyes vanished instantly. He sadly recounted his youthful experiences. He, too, had deeply loved the little princess's mother back then. But this exchange brought only his lover's merciless betrayal. Only then did the emperor realize that what his wife had wanted was merely an heir. And those shallow vows of eternal love were all false. So after his daughter was born, he took out his hatred for his wife on the child. That's why he didn't want to see the little princess. He didn't want to face the culprit who destroyed his love. Then, the man looked at the little princess with hopeful eyes. He hoped to get his daughter's forgiveness. However, a mocking sneer appeared on the girl's face. So this is the truth behind his abandonment. But what does it have to do with him? He can understand his father's agonizing pain at being deceived. But he can't pretend to forgive magnanimously. And just then, a guard's appearance interrupted their conversation. It turned out that the annual nobles conference was about to begin. The emperor reluctantly prepared to leave. Before leaving, he cautiously asked his daughter if she still harbored resentment towards him. The little princess self-deprecatingly shook her head. It wasn't her pitiful father's tragic love story. Rather, his heart, riddled with holes, had long since lost its longing for familial affection. He already knows who his real family is, the ones worth his devotion. So, whether it's his father's concern, or his indifference, he doesn't care anymore. And in the days that followed, the emperor began to compensate his daughter even more desperately. From his son's mouth, he learned about the misappropriation of child support payments over the years. In an instant, his guilt turned to anger. He launched a thorough investigation. But as the investigation deepened, his heart ached. It's not just because of my daughter's miserable life. It's because this matter is somehow connected to the truth about the queen's betrayal back then. It turns out it was all a misunderstanding, and he killed his deeply beloved wife with his own hands. He almost caused his daughter's death as well. The emperor finally began a thorough investigation into the truth of that year. And Jia Huangnu's identity is about to be revealed. Originally, Lily's birth mother was a prostitute temporarily found by the high priestess. And this woman was infertile. She took advantage of the emperor's heartbreak, thus making the emperor believe that Lily was his own daughter. The man firmly believed this, and he raised him by his side. But the emperor never imagined that this child, who looked 8 parts like him, wasn't even his own. And this secret was about to be revealed at the upcoming sacred festival. The high priestess originally intended to use the festival to solidify Lily's death. This also gives him a chance to get close to the envoy sent by the Holy Kingdom. That person is the Pope's only legitimate son. Marrying him means controlling the divine authority. So, long ago, the high priest started frantically building momentum. He had to make Lily the sole recipient of the divine history. So, at this nobles meeting, several ministers successively proposed that Lily receive the distinguished guests. Some even shamelessly praised Lily's outstanding beauty, claiming it would surely attract the envoy's attention. After all, she is the only light of the Pillarisa Empire. The emperor, already tormented by guilt, flew into a rage upon hearing this. If Lily is the light, so what about his little tirade? The originally noisy hall fell instantly silent. The ministers who had just spoken trembled and apologized to the emperor. Fortunately, the man on the throne didn't continue to press the matter. He coldly stated that the task of receiving the VIP could be given to Lily, but on the condition that Lily herself is willing. And next, the emperor didn't intercede for Princess Telodi anymore. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but they didn't know. This iron-blooded emperor had already investigated the high priest. He believed the Pope's legitimate son could discern the authenticity of the divine realm, knowing who is the shining star, and who is the ominous darkness. Meanwhile, the crown prince is having tea with his younger brother. They are both saddened by their failure to obtain their sister's forgiveness. I hear that even the emperor has begun to court his daughter's favor these days. Perhaps he regrets it, just like them. The crown prince now only hopes his sister can be happy. Even if she doesn't forgive him, it doesn't matter. This is the retribution he deserves. But another recent event has given them both a major headache. That is, the investigation into the head maid's embezzlement. The crown prince personally checked every account in detail, but a thorough investigation revealed no discrepancies. Yet the person who harmed his sister escaped the punishment they deserved. So the two brothers decided to join forces. They were determined to seek justice for their wronged little sister. Both brothers regretted their failure to protect their beloved sister, and those who harmed the little princess will finally be punished. The crown prince glared at the head maid, his voice icy and chilling. Is the content of this expense list all true? He slammed the table. The head maid immediately went weak in the knees. Lying now means losing my head. But if I betray the high priest, he'll make sure my death is far worse. She could already imagine herself being dismembered. She dared not look into the crown prince's eyes. She could only silently gamble everything. He gambled that the high priestess had destroyed all the evidence. So the head maid loudly confirmed the situation. And the man at the head seat's eyes instantly reddened. His hands almost crushed the materials on the table. But outwardly he had to maintain the proper decorum. The man forced out a chilling smile. He stiffly praised the woman for her diligence. He had no evidence now. But that didn't mean he would let those who had hurt his sister go. The grievances that little Telodi suffered, he would definitely retaliate 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold upon those people. At this moment, the man suppressed the anger in his heart. He admonished the woman, his words sounding both like comfort and a warning. Defiling the royal family is to court the gravest consequences. Don't do what you shouldn't. Having said that, the crown prince prepared to let the woman leave. However, at that moment, the second prince's teacup suddenly shattered. The boy's hand was cut, bleeding profusely, but he seemed to feel no pain. His icy gaze was fixed on the head maid. His terrifying appearance was like a demon from hell. A chill instantly surged through the woman's heart, because he knew this was a warning from the second prince, and that teacup was clearly the one he had crushed himself. The maidservant fled like a rat scurrying down the street. Leaning against the door, he gasped for breath. It's all that cursed, ill-fated princess's fault. It's not like his life was so bad. He actually has the nerve to complain to the two princes. He should have killed that little disaster star when he had the chance. It seems he needs to discuss the next steps with the high priest. But he didn't expect his crimes to have already been exposed, and countless terrible punishments await him. In the following days, the two princes continued their apologies, but their attentions were mercilessly rejected by their sister. They both thought that as long as they persisted, they would surely win back the princess's heart. But something happened later, but it completely severed the possibility of reconciliation between the siblings. This time, the little princess misunderstood her two older brothers. The crown prince, filled with regret, did everything he could to compensate his sister. But he discovered that the little princess already had dependable family around her. She no longer needed him, her terrible brother. This realization greatly vexed the crown prince. If only he had seen his own heart sooner, his sister wouldn't have left him. Unfortunately, there's no cure for regret in this world. That child was ultimately heartbroken by him. And just then, Ashwin suddenly submitted his letter of resignation. The crown prince furrowed his brow in confusion. He knew how difficult it was to become the head of the knights. And yet this man was about to abandon such a promising future. Then he heard the man solemnly declare that he wished to become a blade for Her Royal Highness the Princess. A gentle voice, devout as a pilgrimage. The crown prince stood rooted to the spot. His pale lips moved, but he couldn't utter a word. It turned out that his love for his sister was not as strong as that of a guard by his side. At that moment, the man suddenly broke down. He was like a child who had done something wrong. He didn't want to admit his mistake, but stubbornly hoped Ashwin would change his mind. That way, at least he wouldn't seem so pathetic. However, the young knight calmly curled his lips. He understood what he would lose. But compared to the little princess's happiness, these external honors are fleeting. Having said that, the man's eyes hardened as he looked up. The crown prince, however, slumped back in defeat. He had lost. He had lost completely. So his self-righteous repentance was utterly worthless. He had clearly resolved to seek his sister's forgiveness. But he didn't even have the resolve to give up his position. At this moment, the man let out a self-deprecating chuckle. No wonder the child still refuses to forgive him. It seems he performed terribly. But right now, he still has things he must do. The crown prince pulled out a thick stack of files from his drawer. These were all carefully selected candidate citizens. Their loyalty is absolutely guaranteed. It will certainly prevent the recurrence of the embezzlement of foster care funds. Although these girls are not, what a daughter of a prominent family, yet she's the best the crown prince could possibly hope for. He's been secretly resisting the high priest's power, where his sister can't see. He only hopes the girl will give him a chance for redemption. Even if it's just to call him brother again, he would be content with that. But the man never expected. His wish would never come true. Because at their next meeting, the little princess would completely break with him. The black-haired princess, considered an ill omen, revealed her true power for the first time. The ugly scar that even the high priest was helpless against was easily healed by her divine magic. And his true identity as the Son of Light is finally about to be revealed. Just a few days ago, the crown prince sent him a selection of hand-picked maids. The little princess received them enthusiastically. However, the maids remained timid and cautious. The outside world is rife with rumors that this black-haired princess is an ominous ill omen, and he's also a difficult master to serve. It's being whispered throughout the palace that he, spoiled and willful, often bullies his kind sister. A while ago, he even made a scene over a hair clip, known throughout the city, so the maids are too nervous to look up. Meanwhile, Loana is already furious. I've known for a while that my little princess isn't treated well in the palace, but that doesn't give the crown prince the right to humiliate her like this, sending a few unattractive and undesirable maids. Isn't he clearly trying to be disgusting? Just as he was about to take his anger out on these newly arrived maids, he saw the little princess walking towards them with a smile. Her kind demeanor lacked any trace of princess-like airs. In no time, she was chatting amiably with the new maids. Everyone was surprised that the princess was quite different from what the rumors described, and their subsequent interactions further overturned their preconceptions. The well-behaved little princess would often help them with chores within her capabilities. Her mature and sensible appearance is all the more heartbreaking. She's only been here a few days, and the girl has already won everyone's affection. However, one thing is causing the little princess a lot of worry. That is the burned scars on the twin sisters' faces. She has already brought the most effective scar removal ointment, but it couldn't erase the ugly scars on their faces. The sisters said. Even the high priest's holy water had no effect on them. Only the legendary healing magic had any chance of completely removing them. Unfortunately, the incantation for this miracle was completely lost 1,000 years ago. Speaking of which, despair etched itself onto the sisters' faces. The little princess, conflicted, bit her lip. He didn't know whether he should help the unfortunate sisters, because he had promised Loana not to reveal his magical abilities. However, ultimately, his inherent kindness prevailed. The little princess returned to her room and began deciphering the gray curses. The complex text made the little princess extremely tired, but he still persisted stubbornly, gritting his teeth. Fortunately, the final result did not disappoint his efforts. He finally found the magic that could cure the twin sisters. So, on a dark and windy night, the little princess invited the two sisters to a secluded garden. At first, my younger sister collapsed in disbelief and protested. But the moment the girl in white was enveloped in holy light, he and his older sister were stunned. For a moment, he thought he saw an angel descend. And the next second, those uneven scars miraculously disappeared. The two sisters looked at each other in disbelief. Their eyes, filled with blood and tears, expressed gratitude to Her Highness the Princess. No one noticed a richly dressed young man standing in the corner. He was muttering to himself, "This is the true light." right in front of his brother. The green tea sister reveals their evil face. They arrogantly believe they are the symbol of light, but don't know their identity as a child of darkness is almost impossible to hide. These days, little Tylety has been busy rejecting apologies from her brothers, while Lily is preparing for the sacred ceremony in a few days. He changed into a pure white, flawless gown. The feigned innocence made him look like an angel who had strayed into the mortal world. He desperately wanted to use his beauty to approach the messengers of the sacred kingdom, but heaven seemed unwilling to condone it. Since dawn, the torrential rain had not stopped. The girl glared at the awful weather, displeased. Meanwhile, the maidservant beside her hastened to explain with a charming smile. She praised the soon-to-arrive envoy as an unparalleled beauty among men, and if he were with the princess, they would surely be a perfect match. Even heaven itself would be extremely reluctant to let them meet. Hearing this, Lily immediately raised her chin triumphantly. After all, in the entire Parisa Empire, no one was more suitable to appear than him, especially considering his black-haired sister's shabby appearance, which didn't even suit the title of princess. Unlike him, with unparalleled beauty, and a supremely noble status, only the sole heir to the sacred kingdom is qualified to be his husband. The girl grew more and more excited, and his expression, under the illumination of the lightning, became even more ferocious. I should first take the divine messenger to see the lily garden my brother gave me. After all, nothing is more sacred than that which is eternally unchanging. Meanwhile, the envoy had already dismounted from his carriage. From the moment he entered the palace, he smelled a stench of corruption. Connecting this to the rumors of a mysterious darkness consuming the light, it made it hard for him not to associate it with the dark child who brought disaster. A subtle unease rose in the boy's heart. Waves of anxiety appeared, but he still continued towards the lily garden where Lily was. But the closer he got, the darker the atmosphere became. But upon seeing Lily, as beautiful as a lily flower, he became utterly convinced that the girl before him was true darkness. The ominous deathly aura about him made people instinctively want to flee. Meanwhile, the boy also sensed another sacred power, though faint and distant, but possesses a tenacious vitality. The boy involuntarily chased after the past, and he witnessed a scene he would never forget. A sacred white light, like a butterfly cocoon, enveloped the beautiful girl, and he was softly murmuring an ancient spell. The next second, fireflies slowly emerged from beneath his feet. The night sky was ablaze with stars, lit up like day. He used sacred magic, lost for 1,000 years, to heal the girl before him. This is the true light of the divine realm. In this moment, he found the meaning of his life. This ominous dark luminary actually used sacred magic lost for 1,000 years. A boundless sea of stars spread out from beneath his feet. In an instant, the boundless darkness was dispelled. Tiny halos of light fell like stars. A gentle touch held the power to heal wounds. The twin sisters nearby were speechless. They hadn't even noticed the changes in each other's faces, until the little princess stopped chanting the spell. They exchanged an incredulous glance. The ugly scar, like a nightmare, had truly vanished. At that moment, the two sisters embraced, weeping with joy, and the little princess showed a relieved expression. None of the three noticed the boy hiding in the corner, but they didn't know that he had already witnessed this shocking scene. So this is true enlightenment. No wonder he smelled decay on Lily, the scent of rot. In other words, the prophecy was wrong from the start. But even suffering the world's most vicious slander, that well-behaved child still maintained the goodness in his heart. The boy admitted he was smitten, but he heard the little princess instruct her maids to keep tonight's events a secret. Perhaps this child harbors some unspeakable secret. The boy also decided to secretly observe for a few more days. Time flew by, and it was the next morning. But the girl was tormented by guilt all night. She had promised Loana she wouldn't use magic again. Yet she shamefully broke her promise. Perhaps she should return the magic book, and the cape her older brother gave her, though she would be a little reluctant to part with it. But reason told her to let go. Perhaps this was a chance to start over with her brothers. Thus, the little princess walked towards the office with great trepidation. She carefully kept both of these things. The cover of the magic book was polished to a shine, and the heavy cloak was neatly folded. Maybe my brothers won't care about such a trivial matter, but it's okay. In these days since I returned, I've learned to reconcile with the past. Resentment only increases our troubles, so I can't bring myself to hate my brothers. This is fine, just as it is. It doesn't expect its brothers to cherish it like they do Lily. Just occasionally remembering. Having her as a sister is enough. With such anxious feelings, the girl lifted her small hand that was knocking. However, the faint conversation in the room made his heart sink. His brothers were actually discussing his name. But the next second, the content of their conversation plunged him into an icy abyss. The cloak he treasured so much, the cloak he wouldn't take off even when he was freezing, was being the trash he casually threw away. They found him dirty. That memory he had carefully cherished was just a self-deceptive joke. At this moment, the girl's heart felt like it was being cruelly squeezed. Even simple breathing was filled with desperate pain. What exactly is he waiting for? A look of sad self-mockery crossed the girl's face. Then she threw down her things, and ran off without looking back. A chance to be forgiven by his sister. But both brothers missed it. A sound of something falling came from outside. The second prince's heart also fluttered in turmoil. Just now, he told a lie against his will. He said he found his sister disgusting. The hurtful words slipped out. The boy was also in agony. How could he possibly dislike his sister? She was his only connection to life. But from childhood, everything that belonged to him would be taken by his brother. His mother's favoritism, Lily's affections, even her innate magical talent. Nothing belonged to him. So when his older brother asked about his sister, he was scared. He was afraid his brother would take away his only treasure. So he told those self-deceptive lies. He stubbornly believed this would make his sister belong only to him. But the words were barely out before he regretted it. He comforted himself, saying he was only deceiving his older brother. But he never expected that at that moment, his well-behaved younger sister stood by the door. He couldn't see the despair on her face. He didn't know that there was no longer any possibility for them as siblings. Pushing open the door, he saw the cloak he had given her on the floor. It still bore the undried tears. No, no, such a coincidence. His trembling hands betrayed him. Never before had the second prince hated himself so much. He then panicked and ran to his sister's chambers. The first prince, equally worried, followed closely behind. But neither of them expected. They will be stopped by the maids at the door. And that sister, who had repeatedly softened her heart, this time, was completely and utterly heartbroken. Do his shameless brothers have any right to ask for his forgiveness? 10 years of cold indifference and neglect, followed by hot and cold treatment, toying with her feelings. It's as if he's just a toy to kill time. But why should he feel sad? He feels pain and heartache just because he's not their favorite, Lily. Does that give them the right to crush his sincere heart into the mud? At this moment, the little princess remembered Li Wen. Someone who truly loves him wouldn't want to see him sad. The gifts from the princes would only make him. So in the following days, no matter how hard his two older brothers pleaded, young Teloti coldly refused to see them. Meanwhile, the envoy from the Holy Kingdom took the initiative to pay their respects to the king. The high priest thought he was quite pleased with Lily's performance. However, the boy's first words were a request for the empire to replace the guide. He subtly expressed his dissatisfaction with Princess Lily. He even proactively recommended the young Tylorty who lives in the queen's palace. The courtiers were all shocked by this news. The high priest, sitting beside him, had the strongest reaction. He interrupted the messenger's request with grief and indignation. He even trotted out the old cliché of a divinely ordained disaster. These words quickly won the support of the courtiers. But the man on the throne coldly interrupted him. He looked down at everyone with disdain. Then he fell. The messenger's request. The high priest trembled with rage in the corner. But he could do nothing against the emperor's orders. So the wicked man conceived another plan. But he didn't realize that his ugly face was being watched by the young man behind him. This person's aura was as evil as Princess Lily's. It's like some ominous offering has donned human skin. It seems all the truth is about to be revealed. She eagerly awaits the day the bright princess's identity is exposed. The ruined, her brothers chased beauty all night. But the little princess's heart is completely unloving. She watched the guilt-ridden performance silently. Only hopeless apathy remained in her quiet eyes. She should cry, she should make a fuss, she should yell at baby's brothers. But for some reason, she was calmer than expected. It's like the feeling of immense anticipation followed by utter disappointment. My heart is too broken to give my brothers another chance. The second prince opened his mouth, wanting to speak but hesitating. But upon meeting his sister's cold gaze, the young man dejectedly lowered his proud head. His voice, dry and hoarse, frantically explained everything that happened that day. He never imagined his sister would coincidentally be standing at the door. And those hurtful words were all unintentional lies. I'm sorry, the second prince murmured repeatedly. But in the face of the truth, his pale apology was so powerless. At this moment, the little princess laughed self-deprecatingly. Even at a time like this, he's still feigning repentance and begging for her forgiveness. Doesn't he know that tears of regret are the cheapest thing? The girl silently refused the second prince's apology. Watching this familiar scene, the first prince felt only endless regret. Once upon a time, my younger sister would sweetly call him brother, and would cover him with her only blanket. He was the one who destroyed all this beauty. But by the time he finally woke up, it was already too late. But even so, he still wanted to compensate for past shortcomings. So he ordered his men to bring out a brand new magic book. The crown prince presented this expensive gift on his own. Then he turned and fled in disgrace. They self-deceptively thought that this would allow them to escape their sister's rejection. But he didn't know that this would only invite deeper disgust. His brothers continued to act autocratically as before. But this was all irrelevant to him. The child who longed for love was forever left in the past. Even if his brothers begged and pleaded in the future, They could never recover this sibling relationship full of regret. They themselves broke the blooming roses. They shouldn't question why the flowers withered. Time flew by, and the eve of the sacred ceremony arrived. During these days, Lily was busy attracting the attention of the divine messenger, but the boy's mind was completely on little Taylodi. That day, she snuck into the girl's yard as usual. But unexpectedly, she bumped into the little princess who was tending her vegetables. The girl looked up and saw a sight she would never forget. A handsome young man, like something straight out of a painting. Just standing there, he inspired a feeling of devout worship. He remembered the maid's blushing discussions from a few days ago. So this is the noble and sacred coat of arms knight. But the next second, the princess's expression froze. Because the boy told her about the sacred magic that night, he saw everyone's faces. The divine messenger actually gave the only bonding ribbon to the prophesied calamity star. At this moment, the high priest's lies crumbled. The courtiers also reconsidered the princess's identity, but only young Taylodi remained in the dark. He didn't know the significance of the bonded ribbon. Just a few days ago, a delegation from the sacred kingdom suddenly arrived. He started by asking about his sacred magic. A sudden flurry of panic arose in the little princess's heart. He couldn't bear to break the current peace. Although life in the queen's palace wasn't affluent, it was better than that period when she was forgotten by everyone. She had suffered enough. Those who aren't loved are wrong even to breathe. She feared returning to face more unbearable humiliation. It was the glaring partiality. It was the lack of compassion she couldn't earn even if she tried her best. But looking at this wondrous boy, the girl couldn't utter a single word of excuse. His gaze was too penetrating, as if all filth could not escape his scrutiny. So he had to sit down and consult with his subordinates about whether they could keep his magical secret for him. The boy smiled gently and agreed. Then he reached out and hooked fingers with the little princess as a promise. At this moment, young Taylodi hesitated. He was the symbol of darkness. He was the source of misfortune. He was a disaster that even his family would find unclean. How could such a sacred being? Would you really be willing to touch him? He curled up uneasily, his fingertips fidgeting. But the next second, a beautiful ribbon was already wrapped around his waist. The golden lace was very much like the boy's dazzling blonde hair. He told the little princess, "This is a custom engraved there." But he hid the most crucial information. A messenger's life is only bound by one ribbon, and the person who receives it is the girl he wants to spend the rest of his life with. While the little princess was stunned, the boy had silently turned and left. Before leaving, he cast one last, deep look back at the heartbreaking girl. He hoped that next time they met, she would call his name. That afternoon, news of the messenger sending the ribbon spread like wildfire through the palace. The maids reported every rumor they heard to Lily. The girl's delicate face instantly contorted into a hideous grimace. Why? She, and only she, is the symbol of light. She alone deserves the noble Huixia. And that ill-omened sister of hers should rot in the mud like a bug. It must have been her, seducing the gentleman. The girl speculated to herself, portraying her sister with the vilest hatred. At this moment, the seeds of jealousy grew wildly in his heart. He couldn't wait to humiliate his sister again. The new hair clip father sent. That person hasn't seen it yet. He's really looking forward to seeing my sister's distraught expression. The wronged little princess finally discovers her true origins. It turns out there's someone in this world who deeply loves her. That day, Loana's father suddenly entered the palace. Without a word, he handed her an old diary. She told the little princess that this was something left behind by the queen. A hairband and a perfectly preserved hairpin. The man promised the queen that he would return it to the little princess when she grew up. But the diary has a magical seal on it. It has to be unlocked under specific circumstances. So in the evening, the little princess came to her mother's room. The clean desk was spotless. It was clearly meticulously cleaned by Loana. She sometimes wondered, my mother must have been a gentle beauty when she was alive. Otherwise, why would so many people have followed her? But unfortunately, as her daughter, I was a pariah, a bringer of misfortune, dragging my mother down with me, making her share the blame for the misfortunes. Others said it was my ill fate. He killed the empress. So it would have been better if he had never been born. Everyone could have had a happy ending. And he wouldn't have had to face all that despicable malice alone. Thinking of this, tears silently fell onto the diary cover. A dazzling white light suddenly enveloped the entire room. The little princess was pulled into a beautiful dream. It was Rebecca's memory. A lively girl ran towards the young emperor, and in the man's deep eyes was an unmelting tenderness. He gently chided the girl to slow down. His low, husky voice was full of worried tenderness. The man gently touched the girl's belly. The little princess saw happiness in his eyes. It was the pride of a first-time father. It was boundless yearning for the future. It was also an emotion he had never seen in his own father's eyes. So he had been looked forward to. That day, I saw my mother playfully pushing my father away, then talking to me, still unborn. Their love was so real, each only seeing the reflection of the other in their eyes. But if that were truly the case, why did father hate mother so much? He still remembers the complaints he heard when he first met the emperor. He said he had nightmares every night about being abandoned by his lover. And the source of the tragedy was the birth of little Taylord. At that time, father's eyes were filled with only suffering and pain. However, at this moment, but large cracks appeared in the dream. By the time the little princess came to her senses, the scene had changed. His mother's belly was high and swollen, but his face was clouded with gloom. Loana asked him why he deliberately distanced himself from the emperor. Then she heard the girl's pained whisper. He didn't want to do this, but in the future he could not afford to fail. His beloved husband would kill their child with his own hands, and the only solution at present was to leave. The girl offered a tragic smile. He didn't know if what he was doing was right or wrong, but he couldn't allow his only daughter to be hurt. At some point, the little princess nearby was already in tears. He wanted to rush over and hug his mother, even just once, but the woman's gentle smile faded little by little in the bright light. The dream abruptly ended at this moment. Thus, the seal on the diary was completely broken. The little princess gradually glimpsed the misunderstanding of that year within these sorrowful words. A misunderstanding. The emperor cruelly abandoned his pregnant wife. He wasn't even given a chance to explain. The man had an affair just when his wife needed him most. The little princess turned the pages of her mother's diary. Just a few words, but he could feel the sadness hidden within them. His mother's gentle entries, his growth, his every attitude, every beat of his heart. Even though pregnancy wasn't easy, the mother still eagerly awaited her daughter's birth. Until she learned from a servant. The emperor had a new love long before he knew. All happiness came to an abrupt end. The later diary entries became increasingly shocking. He seemed to see his mother, growing thinner day by day, forcing a smile for his sake, and his damned father, embracing a new woman when his wife needed him most. At this moment, the little princess felt both angry and sad. More often, I felt helpless. I wished he had never been born. But by the end, the girl suddenly found peace. It was her mother's gentle apology to him. I'm sorry, I was a failure as a mother. I couldn't keep your father, but I never regretted giving birth to you. You are the most precious treasure of my life. Your crooked words are like a final page before death, but they contain all a mother's love for you. Gently closing the diary in my hands, the little princess's sadness still lingers. Her father still stubbornly resents her mother's estrangement. And what's even more ridiculous is, his sister's child, born to his new lover, was actually born on the same day as him. The girl feels her mother's sacrifices were not worth it. But what he really wants is for his father to know the truth and regret it deeply. Meanwhile, the green tea sister has begun her wicked scheme. She has people invite the little princess to her tea party, but at the same time, she also invited her father and brother, and the echoes of the sacred kingdom remain. Lily had made thorough preparations. She fantasized that her brother would unconditionally help her as before, and that her sister would, as always, flee in disgrace. Soon, the little princess received an invitation from her sister. But it was less an invitation. It's more like an order. Every word reveals a sickening arrogance. A nauseating arrogance. Loana was furious on the spot. He angrily stood up for his young master. But the girl smiled and shook her head. He doesn't care about these petty tricks of vying for favor anymore. Brother or not. Father or not. If my sister wants to pick up the trash, she can take it all. But he will definitely go to that afternoon tea. He needs to tell his sister to stop these meaningless attempts to compete for favor. So the little princess put on the hair clip her mother left her. But he didn't expect his sister to try and grab his things again. Not only did their father not stop her, he also lost his temper at him. In front of his two older brothers, the green tea sister started bullying her older sister again. He deliberately obscured the content of the invitation. He did it so that his sister would be embarrassed at the party. Only when the princess arrived did she discover that her father and brother had been waiting at the long table for a long time. The lavish decorations were nothing like an ordinary afternoon tea. Everyone was dressed in elegant gowns. Lily, moreover, was wearing her most magnificent dress. He enthusiastically invited his nervous older sister. He hid his triumphant expression behind a false smile. The little princess fidgeted anxiously. Her shabby appearance was out of place among the elegance of the surroundings. The scrutinizing gazes of the crowd left her breathless. Why? She had already decided not to compete, but why won't they let her go? The girl tried hard to control her trembling body, but the green tea sister's mischief had only just begun. She subtly praised her sister's new hair clip. The tone was exactly the same as it was at the 100 Flowers garden last time. Is she going to take it for herself again? The little princess's body tensed, stiffening. But just then, the emperor on the throne suddenly stood up. He angrily demanded to know where his daughter had stolen the hairpin from. His icy gaze seemed to want to devour her alive. But at this moment, the little princess suddenly stopped being afraid. Her mother and he did nothing wrong. Why should they bear these unfounded accusations? Thinking this, the little princess looked directly into the emperor's eyes. She told her father. This is the only thing his mother left him. However, hearing this, The emperor murmured in disbelief. He couldn't believe the empress would keep a gift he had given her. Just as he couldn't believe Rebecca loved him until her death. The man's stunned expression was as if he had received a massive shock. But the little princess laughed sarcastically. For whom is this belated affection intended? Even if mother were alive, she would only find it disgusting. Then he coldly glanced at his older brother beside him. Both of them nervously avoided eye contact. Seeing this scene, the little princess found it utterly ridiculous. They claimed to love him, but when his hands were covered in frostbite and he nearly froze to death, where were they? He was mocked by his sister. When I was being made difficult for by my father, where were they? At this moment, the little princess finally made up her mind. With an impassive expression, she announced to everyone, since everyone cannot accept me, then from now on, I will never set foot outside the empress's palace again. The weighty oath resounded. The father and brothers were inexplicably panicked. Guilt flooded their hearts. They stammered an explanation to the little princess, saying no one hated her. But the girl calmly spoke, "It's not that I hate you." At that moment, everyone's belief crumbled. The girl's words shattered their self-deceived respectability. The crown prince opened his mouth to speak, then hesitated. But seeing his sister's unreserved gaze, a strange fear enveloped him. He was wrong. He always thought he still had a chance to win his sister back. But until this moment, only then did he realize that the little shadow that had clung to him was gone forever. Only a narrow, long table separated them. But his sister's resolute back was as if they would never see each other again in this life. Tears of regret slipped through his fingers. But all of this is irrelevant to the little princess now. On the way back, the sun was shining brightly. The girl's steps unconsciously lightened. She just didn't expect the messenger would suddenly ask about that painful past. The princess has completely severed ties with her family of the past. Once upon a time, she unconditionally chased after her brother's backs, begging for a shred of care that wasn't hers. But now she no longer needs it. 10 years of neglect. Enough to make a hopeful heart slowly sink. What's more, his brothers only gave him repeated hurt. Their homes were so close. Just a few more steps, and he could see his most helpless side. I saw his tattered skirt. I saw his pathetic state. But for 10 whole years, they never once set foot in his courtyard. The little princess waited alone in the courtyard, waiting and waiting, until all the blooming flowers withered, until the clean desk was covered in dust. He spent his entire childhood waiting in the midst of scarcity, and now he will return that despair twofold. He will also make them experience the taste of being unloved. The sincerity he offered was trampled into the mud. His heartfelt confession was taken as a lie. The little princess waited a full 10 years. So when her brothers shamelessly asked for her forgiveness, she unceremoniously told them to wait another 10 years. What she really thought was to let her 2 brothers live in guilt forever. She imagined their shocked and regretful faces when she left. The girl happily hummed a little tune, but to the envoy's eyes, it looked more like a forced smile. He comforted the little princess, telling her not to be sad, but the girl indifferently shook her head. She no longer cared. Those people aren't worth his affection. Besides, everyone knows he's a prophet of disaster. He's gotten used to living alone. The little princess bravely lifted her face, but she didn't know that this only made people feel sorrier for him. Impulsively, the boy asked the question that had been weighing on his heart. He wondered if the girl would resent the gods who issued the prophecy, and him, the messenger, carrying that resentment. But the little princess hurriedly waved her hands. She didn't hate him. Resentment was the most useless emotion in the world, and the messenger was a particularly kind person. Hearing this, the boy finally breathed a sigh of relief. But inexplicably, a wave of disappointment washed over him. He realized he was just a kind, good person. But that was all right. He was willing to silently guard the little princess's happiness. Then he told the girl not to worry about the prophecy. In his eyes, he will always be an embodiment of light. The little princess was amused by this gentle comfort. And he also remembered another person. That black-haired older brother in the neighboring country. I wonder how he's been doing these days. Did anyone ever remove those shackles, those symbols of restraint, to protect the beloved princess? Li Wan, from a neighboring country, had actually decided to rebel. She never imagined that the dirty girl would be the empire's princess. She never imagined that the well-behaved, sensible child would be considered a dark omen. She was so kind. But this world never treated her kindly. So Li Wan wants to become stronger. She wants to become an unshakable presence in the empire. That way, she can openly clear the princess's name. Thus, the youth proactively approached the crown prince. He is about to stir up a bloody and stormy confrontation. The current nation is already decayed and rotten. The people need a wise and capable leader. And he needs a powerful position. One that can protect the little princess from harm. Li Wan then presented the list of informants to the crown prince. He knew that there would be no turning back. But he couldn't bear to see the little princess continue to suffer in the empire. Perhaps cruel punishment awaits him after failure. But he doesn't care. Last time, it was Taylord who offered him salvation in the darkness. This time, it's his turn to take him away. And on the other side, Teresa's palace. The little princess is currently in danger. The high priest summoned the vile head servant again. It's to secretly and silently eliminate little Telodi. A cruel sneer played on the man's face. Blame the willful little princess for not heeding advice. If he behaved himself and remained a mere disaster, I could have mercifully spared his life. But now his existence threatens Lily's position, so he must be eliminated completely. The high priestess has ordered the head maid to keep a close watch on the queen's palace. Act immediately when the opportunity arises. But the woman suddenly spoke angrily. Apparently, in a few months, the emperor plans to assign the 5th Knights to Lady Tylodai. That was originally the direct guard of the Princess of Light. The high priest's eyes darkened. Then he spoke coldly. Darkness is doing its utmost to devour everything around. Therefore, we must protect the precious Princess Lily. The head maid nodded in agreement, as if brainwashed. But she didn't know this was a deeper conspiracy of the high priest. It turns out that from birth, the Princess of Light had never been injured, because her blood is an eerie green. To make amends to his neglected daughter, the regretful emperor went to the princess's door to apologize late at night. He waited cautiously outside the door. His remorseful eyes were full of passion. Behind the man followed a neat line of soldiers. This is a gift he specially prepared for his daughter, waiting for the little princess to come out of the palace. The knights immediately lined up to welcome her under the emperor's orders. The grand scene was incongruous with the quiet courtyard. The girl watched them like they were clowns, quietly staring at everyone's performance. Her expressionless face held a coldness unbefitting her age. What should she do now? Should she be tearfully grateful for her father's condescending gift? Or should she readily accept this cheap apology? Is this the only way? To allow them to ease their guilt with a clear conscience? Using self-righteous apologies to beautify those cruel injuries. But the little prince just doesn't want to forgive. No one can return his 10 years of happiness. No one can compensate for his lonely childhood. Those miserable and sad days are etched into his soul like a brand. What's more, he's not qualified to forgive on his mother's behalf. So the little princess coldly rejected her father's gift. Her distant attitude deeply wounded the man's heart. He asked her, bewildered, hadn't she said she wouldn't resent him? However, looking at the hair clip in the little princess's ear, the emperor seemed to suddenly realize something. He muttered Rebecca's name to himself. His eyes gradually revealed an uncontrollable frenzy. He carelessly threw the parts on the ground. The man cried out in anguish, clutching his daughter's shoulders. He wanted to know what his wife had left behind before she died. Watching this familiar scene, the little princess found it incredibly amusing. What a deeply affectionate and perfect husband. When my mother gave birth alone, where was he? When she was starving and freezing, almost dying, where was he then? And now he's putting on this act of searching for death and life? It seems that abandoning his deceased mother is the one guilty of betraying their feelings. Then let him repent enough. Although the little princess doesn't want the emperor to desecrate her mother's remains, she wants to see the man regret and suffer even more. A misunderstanding that could have been cleared up with a few more questions, caused a couple who should have been happy to miss their whole lives. Ultimately, they weren't in love enough. Thinking of this, the princess had her mother's diary retrieved. Then she solemnly handed it to her father. He finally found the truth of that year in the diary. It turned out that the empress, whom he had hated his whole life, had loved him deeply all along. As the bloody past is gradually revealed, the man's heart is also filled with extreme pain. Regret is insufficient to describe his current despair. He even had thoughts of suicide. Could death atone for his past self? Could it earn him his wife's gentle forgiveness? The emperor thus tormented himself with these thoughts. He was heartbroken, suffering intensely. Yet he wouldn't let go of a single detail in the diary. Tears of regret blurred his vision. He roared, helpless and dejected like a trapped beast. A deathly silence pervaded the courtyard. A long time passed. The man finally managed to raise his hand. He wanted to touch their child, but the little princess subtly avoided him. At that moment, the emperor laughed self-deprecatingly. It's all retribution, indeed. He looked at his daughter before him with regret. He sought solace and redemption. But the girl coldly told him to take his entire knightly order away. He didn't need any form of compensation. But he would never forgive either. These so-called amends only made him feel sick. He also asked his father to return the diary sooner. Giving him even a second more is an insult to his mother. The little princess's gaze was resolute and cold. She used a distant attitude to reject her father's goodwill. But the emperor didn't give up. Even if his daughter resented him, having lost her wife, she couldn't afford to lose this last remaining treasure. So she announced, in a commanding tone, to the princess, that if her daughter didn't accept the knight's protection, she would send these guards out onto the streets. The threat only deepened the princess's aversion. But in her kindness, she ultimately accepted her father's gift. A week passed in the blink of an eye. The little princess's life returned to its usual calm. Her brother and father hadn't bothered her. She enjoyed her current life. But during this time, an unpleasant little incident occurred. The purple-haired maid discovered the little princess's magical secret. For the sake of her family's revival, She prepared to spread the news. Fortunately, the plan was discovered in time by the twin sisters before it could be carried out, but this became a constant threat hanging over the little princess. Meanwhile, those under the banner of the Sacred Kingdom are about to leave. Her purpose in coming to the Empire was for the Sacred Kingdom's activities. The ceremony is over now. She's come to say her final farewell to the young princess. Perhaps their next meeting will be years from now. He wants to take this opportunity to confess his feelings to the girl. I was only supposed to give one tied ribbon, but the unsuspecting little princess gave me a sacred emblem of the divine kingdom. The boy happily came to the girl's bedchamber, only to find that almost every guard there had one. It seems the little princess treated the ribbons as ordinary gifts. The boy couldn't help feeling a little disappointed, but thinking that their next meeting would be 5 years later, he still mustered his courage and came before the little princess. He shyly and gently expressed his feelings. A blush, a rare sight on his fair face. His deep eyes were full of unwavering love. The little princess looked up and met the gaze of the black ribbon she wore close to her heart. A pretty bow, running from her collarbone to her heart, seemed to declare the girl's strong feelings for him. The little princess's heart was uncontrollably thumping. But at that moment, he didn't know how to respond. He thanked his subordinates for their care over the past few days. But this was far from enough to make them intimate lovers. He had witnessed too much torment between his father and mother. He had long since given up on expecting love. The little princess shifted her gaze, uncomfortable and embarrassed. The boy immediately and skillfully changed the subject. He told the girl that he should go home. Looking at the little princess's reluctant eyes, he secretly vowed in his heart that one day, he would clear the little princess's foul name. Even if the cost was defying the worshipped gods, he wouldn't care. That night, the boy boarded the departing carriage. Many years later, the girl finally understood that the messenger's binding ribbon could only be given to one person. The missed chance of their youth was lost forever. Meanwhile, Li Wan, with the crown prince, had successfully seized power. They ousted the incompetent emperor. They established a new regime in the impoverished small country. The young prince led his armies in battles across the land. With each neighboring small country he annexed, he felt he was drawing closer to the little princess. In this way, everything went back on track. But danger lurked beneath the calm facade. The dark reputation of the star thief grew worse, fueled by the high priest's incitement. And those priests who discovered the truth were cruelly murdered by him. An uninvited guest arrived at the imperial palace that day. Her striking beauty was 8 points similar to the little princess's mother. The princess completely rejected her brother's hobbies, one humble apology letter after another. But the girl didn't even look at them before throwing them in the trash. People only understand the value of something after they lose it. But not all mistakes deserve unconditional forgiveness. The apocalypse is the greatest tolerance the little princess can offer her brothers. What's even more ridiculous is how they hurt little Taylor before, and now how they ignore him. Princess Lily should be happy, but for some reason, he feels incredibly sad. Why can't they be given the same love? Why must we wait until we lose them to regret it? But it's all irrelevant to him now. He doesn't want to have anything to do with his brothers anymore. Let this endless guilt become a nightmare. Let it punish those terrible adults instead of him. Meanwhile, in a secluded temple, a woman resembling the queen secretly removed her heavy hood. A flicker of panic crossed the high priest's eyes, but he quickly resumed his false smile. The woman was looking for her biological daughter. The high priestess coldly refused. She said the payment she offered was already more than enough. If she wanted Lily to maintain her current status, she shouldn't appear before her. Hearing this, the woman bowed her head and smiled bitterly. Yes, she took the high priest's money, but that was still his daughter, the child she carried for 10 months. Greed blinded his eyes. But more than that, he believed the high priest's deception. The man embellished all the conspiracies as divine will, allowing him to take advantage of the situation. He interfered in another's relationship. It was because he had a similar appearance to the empress. Therefore, he was able to deceive the emperor and spend a night with him. But after the fact, the woman who did wrong grew increasingly regretful. He ultimately paid the price for his greed. He had to move out of the imperial city, living incognito. He had already accepted this life. But a checkup last month left him utterly shocked. The doctor said he had already lost his ability to have children. Therefore, his daughter is likely a non-human monster. The woman anxiously voiced her suspicions. But the naive girl hadn't yet realized her dangerous situation. Then she saw the high priest darkly narrow his eyes, threateningly telling her that this was God's will. A body incapable of bearing children yet gave birth to the empire's light. Could there be a more sacred miracle than this? After he finished speaking, the man brandished the sharp dagger. The woman immediately fell silent in fear. But secrets always come out eventually. Soon, Lily will discover that she has green blood flowing through her veins. And as an alchemical product, she cannot even withstand the most basic blessing. The Fox sisters' false identity can no longer be concealed. The real Princess of Light is returning. Time flies, and 5 years have passed. And these 5 years were arguably the happiest and most blissful time for little Taylodi. She would no longer grieve over her biased brothers. I no longer need to fawn over or beg those so-called family members. The girl devoted much of her time to the study of magic, and soon possessed an unparalleled and terrifying power. She also found the true family who deserved her devotion. The queen's palace echoed daily with different sounds of laughter and joy. The little princess's smile grew increasingly frequent. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the two brothers, filled with regret, were not doing well. Guilt, catalyzed by time, slowly swelled, quickly consuming their entire lives. The crown prince often hallucinated the girl's sweet voice calling brother, but when he turned around, only he remained in the room, alone and desolate. No one cared about his injured body anymore. No one would cover him with the remaining blanket. He had ultimately lost the sister who deeply loved him. The second prince's condition was even worse. A full 5 years. He was trapped in that unspoken apology. Closing his eyes, he saw his sister's tearful accusation. Opening his eyes, he saw the person's resolute departing back. Exhausted, he often held the no longer clean cloak. Now he finally understands what it feels like to love someone you can't have. However, his sister had already made a pact with them, no contact for 10 years. Even though the two brothers humbly begged at the gates of the empress's palace, the resolute princess still chose to refuse them entry. And some other things happened during those 5 years. First, the crown prince of the neighboring country rebelled. The captain, the Grand Duke who aided his ascension to the throne, was the samely one who took in the little princess years ago. The gentle youth, tempered by time, had grown tall and mature, and his rapidly expanding power already threatened the increasingly decaying empire. Another matter is the upcoming evolution event. Since the little princess secluded herself in the empress's palace, the empire has faced the longest period of natural disasters in its history. The parched land yields no crops, a raging plague claims lives, countless refugees are displaced, and the high priest blames all the calamities on the little princess. The despicable man wants to use the ignorant masses to eliminate true light. He didn't expect the emperor to launch a sacred evolution event because of this. This means all members of the royal family must attend. But Lily, a product of dark magic, cannot withstand the cleansing holy light. No one could believe it. The dark princess, considered a harbinger of disaster, had actually received God's blessing, while the light princess, revered as a goddess, dared not even touch the faintest holy light. The hall was immediately filled with the incredulous gasps of the people. Princess Green Tea was already trembling with fear. Just a few days ago, he discovered a terrifying secret about himself. His blood was a strange, eerie green. That's a characteristic of the legendary artificial puppets. In other words, he wasn't the emperor's daughter at all. Everything he possesses is fake. His father's favoritism, his brother's affection, the people's adoration, and the glory of the radiant princess. Everything should belong to my older sister. But he's just a magically created being, a law-abiding habit. How could he accept this despairing fact? He didn't want to be rejected by everyone like his sister. His brother and the forces of the Holy Kingdom could only belong to him alone. At this moment, the seeds of jealousy took root and sprouted in the girl's heart. However, at that moment, a loud knock echoed at the room's door. She heard the head maid's voice outside. The girl immediately changed out of her blood-stained gown. Along with the gown, she shed her ugly facade. But the next second, cracks appeared in the girl's hypocritical mask. Because she heard the head maid say the sacred evolution ceremony was about to begin. In the empire, receiving the blessing is an extremely important aristocratic ceremony. Only legitimate royalty can receive the baptism of holy light. But the emperor's orders are equally inviolable. So, in anxious anticipation, the day of the evolution ceremony arrived. The green tea girl, as always, wore a white dress. Harmless as she was, she resembled a pure little orchid. But the dark princess, little Taylodi, wore an elegant black dress. The color of the night made her the most beautiful focus of the venue. The emperor froze where he stood the moment he saw his daughter. Her appearance reminded him of his beloved wife in his youth. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. After a long time, the man finally managed a greeting to his daughter. However, the little princess only nodded perfunctorily. She didn't want to have anything more to do with this irresponsible father. Following this, the first and second princes also came out to apologize, their faces full of remorse. His gentle expression was full of tender concern for his younger sister. But years of disappointment had completely shattered the girl's already broken heart. Without a second thought, she refused her brother's humble apologies. The persistent crown prince, however, continued to try every means to keep her. But then, the ceremonial horn suddenly sounded. The helpless man could only awkwardly give up. Next was the royal family's blessing ceremony. In order of age, young Taylodi was before Lily, and when it was his turn, the holy light of baptism failed to ignite. This meant the blessing ceremony failed on the spot. The guests watching the ceremony were instantly thrown into an uproar. Whispers of "accursed child" arose. Young Tyler on the stage was also lost in bewildered confusion. However, the next second, A far more powerful orb of light appeared above the girl's head. This is a blessing exclusive to the gods. The black-haired princess, marked as a calamitous star, yet received the highest level of divine blessing during the baptism ceremony. Gentle holy light illuminated the entire temple. This miraculous scene instantly stunned everyone present. The rumors insulting him crumbled. Some even began to question the oracle's content. So, under the guidance of public opinion, everyone's attention turned to Lily, who was preparing for her baptism. As the chosen one, favored by the gods, he should have a blessing ceremony even more glorious than his sisters. Alas, how could a mere green-blooded monster withstand the blessing of a god? And he, being one of darkness, could never bring hope to the empire. Knowing the truth, the little green tea could only cower in the crowd. But under everyone's serious scrutiny, he had to grit his teeth and ascend the altar of blessing. The girl tried hard to maintain a forced smile on her face, but those under the benefactor who granted the blessing have already discovered the girl's abnormality. The death aura on her is far stronger than he imagined. He can only try to complete the next evolution. And at this moment, Lily's spirit has already fallen into a state of nervous collapse. All sorts of bad thoughts swirl around. In his mind, he remembered his sister, the bright, unmarried woman whose identity he had stolen. He had witnessed his sister's tragic life, so he absolutely did not want to lose everything he had now. The next second, the girl forcefully threw off the messenger's arm. She curled up her trembling body, almost in a frenzy. A wave of murmurs instantly arose in the hall, but Lily on the stage selectively ignored them. She insisted that the high priest baptize her alone. This request was immediately met with questioning from the people. However, at that moment, the temple doors were pushed open anxiously. A man was seen lovingly embracing the girl on the ground. She used a clumsy lie to excuse Lily's discomfort, and the solemn ceremony ended hastily due to the little green tea's mischief. Unconcerned, turned to leave. However, at that moment, an old voice called out to him from behind. It was the little princess's father. His eyes were filled with weary resignation. He begged his daughter for a chance to atone. The emperor wanted to build a palace near the imperial city for the little princess, so he could see his daughter more often for the rest of his life. The man's voice was choked with suppressed sobs. Meanwhile, his two older brothers also humbly apologized. They lowered their proud heads. As family members, they begged their sister for her simple forgiveness. Unfortunately, their humble pleas did not earn the princess's compassion. The previously calm girl had fallen into complete darkness.